Boy, it's hard to imagine a nicer day. We woke up this morning. Listen to those birds. The mating season of the birds. Oh, the birds are flying around. And it's really, we're coming up, well, later this afternoon. We have a party here. It's Easter Sunday, but we got a couple hours to spend down by the model. Listen to those birds. Flying season is almost here. Oh. Now, I always like to put something away for a couple of days, a day or so, look at it, and then decide if I want to add or take away or whatever. Now, the one thing I was waiting to do is detail around the cockpit area, because this really takes, well, takes practice, I guess is the right word. But I'm prepared to do this 3 or 4 times until I'm happy with it. And what I want to do is establish a line of rivets around it. And you would think this would be a little easier, but I got to do it by eye. Don't get to use a ruler because these are kind of curvy lines. But when I have a little bit of time like this, and today, of course, we're having company and we're going, actually, we're going to a cookout today. Can you believe that? And I'm thinking, you know, when I look at this, I just like to always decide, do I want a little bit more, a little bit less? Yeah, that looks okay. But this can really be, well, that's what I wanted to show it anyway. A little bit of extra work to do. And the good news is if you're not happy with it, real simple. Get out the Q-tips and some Windex and just erase it. And I'm trying not to violate my own golden rule of if one not enough is better than one too many. And the way I like to do it is just look at it a day after I actually do some ink work. Now I still have to ink the top of the wing, and that looks like it might be too big of a job for today. I really don't want to start anything big because I know we're going to have company later. Yeah, now see, I can compare this side. That little line of rivets is just going to make that canopy just stand out just a little bit better. Now, if you could do a straight line with a ruler, it's real easy. It's got the spacing marked. This is kind of, well, let's see if we get this, that we're happy with it. Again, that's the nice thing with any ink work. See, shading is not like that. If you overshade a plane, you really got a lot of work to undo it. But ink, to undo it's only a few seconds. You know, I think that, now I'm going to go around the back, of course, that's going to add just a little bit of detailing up into that area. So I like to look at this from a lot of angles, of course. Again, I want to always be thinking about that rule of not overdoing this. But one of the good things while we were having coffee, Garen told me these people that we're going over to see, our next door neighbors, we don't have to go over there till this afternoon. I thought this was going to be 1 o'clock. So I'm going to lay out the top ink on the wing. Maybe I can get some of that done even. No sense just wasting time here. Because I see that the weather is breaking, and it's not going to be long before the flying season's here. I would guarantee the hogs are out there flying today. Now, I know the one thing that's definitely not the same, the ink lining on the top of the wing and the bottom very different. So what I'm going to do is lay out the top. Now the ailerons will be a mirror image. I'll bring those lines up around. I can do that. The lines that go out on a flap, the rivet lines, will have to get picked up from here. But basically the boxes on this are not going to change. So the first thing I need to do is just lay out some of these ink lines and lay them out very similar. Lay them out with tape, the way we always lay out all of this kind of stuff. And then sight from the bottom that any one that should line up does line up. We know we're going to need one up here, however I can do that blind. I need one ahead of here to simulate where the wing spar is. So usually what I would try to do first is just create a box, knowing that I'm going to have certain things that are going to be the same, certain things are going to be different. Now we can bring that box around. I can bring that around. This side is going to be different. This one, the one on the other side is going to be a wraparound, and over here it's going to be totally different because we don't have landing gear and radiators here. Now I know that's where that line is on the bottom, so once I flip that over, I can see where the tape came off of this side, and that's going to rough in that line for me. And that completes one side of the box. Now the other side is not going to be exactly the same. And this is always one of the things, is just to get everything in your mind laid out with, I guess, the box, the tape, that you're happy with the way it looks before you commit to doing some intricate ink work. And once I've got that roughed in, and I have to take into account that I have the walkways here, now it's just a question of taking some little measurements and transposing it right out onto the other wing. Well, maybe I can lay out some of these lines. I can always start with the box, the picture frame, the outline. Then there's some big hatches, and I got to look at how those hatches actually look, because they're the access to the machine guns. And even though we're not modeling machine guns, what's going to happen is that would be one of the panel lines on the real ship. Let's just see if I got these pretty accurate. That's not exactly what I want. Now, getting this, actually this is what I have to do. It's so, where's my little ruler? What happens on a curved wing, sometimes it doesn't look right, but it is right. And to make it look right, you have to make it wrong. Now, I measured this off about 6 times already. Okay, shame on me. Just looks wrong. One of those things, just looks wrong. And since I don't have obviously have a helper here, and it's always these long lines that once you get these on, and filling in the details is usually a lot more relaxing. Now, just as I suspected, it seems like the ink on the top of the wing needs a little more going back over the lines than it did on the bottom. Not sure why. Maybe because I handled this top of the wing more. Okay, so we got one of the first lines on. I'm going to let each one dry and go down to the bottom, do the bottom ones. It's amazing when you get the big lines on, the rest of them are just a piece of cake. It's the big ones. I got to figure out exactly how I want to simulate those hatches that where the machine guns would be, whether I want to make a template or just do them some other way. It's amazing how once you get the big lines on, the little ones are just a lot more enjoyable to get on. I didn't expect to have this much time. I thought we were going to be heading out of here at lunchtime, but I'll certainly take what I can get. This is almost like a little free session. Well, we've got one wing already boxed out. We'll do the other one off camera, and we're ready to start laying some details in here. And it's always good, at least when I'm doing the boxing, go right over to the other wing, get the other one done. Because what it allows me to do is this one will dry up, and there'll always be one little wet spot on the ink. If you smudge it, oh, what a pain in the neck. So if I bounce back, now if I do the boxing on the other side, then I can say the next step will be to lay out the detailing. Now see, these are the hatches where they would reload and I guess maintain the cannons. But we're going to try to lay something out, something that looks not totally similar, but well, something we can accent the model with. And of course the first thing is to lay it out with tape, take a look at how it looks. Now I had the template from the Spitfire, of course I saved it. In that, on some of the Spitfires it has that blister there. I just have to put some new tape on it so it sticks down. But that'll come in handy, one less template I have to make up. Now I like the way that looked, by the way. I got some of the little detailing here that I wanted to, but I want to look at it with the rivets in place. And there's only one way to do that. I got to line this up. And the problem with this is if you don't get it exactly in the middle, boy, it'll look lousy. You got to look for the reflection on this. So here we had a very unexpected, well, little treat of having a little free work session here. And I got most of, maybe not all, most of, oh, we'll see because we're going to get ready soon. An Easter cookout. By the way, these rivets are 1/10, and I've tried making them wider, thinner, but at 1/10 they seem to be just about the right size. Gotta be so careful not to get this off the center of the cap strip. See, that thing has to go right down the middle of the cap strip. Right, now next thing I'm going to go out each cap strip, get the ink in on the cap strips, and then take a look at one panel and see if I need to add anything or take some away. Well, we're getting most of this inked actually on the top of the wing here. I'm ready to start doing the flaps. And it always pays to save these templates. You never know when you're going to need them again. And especially if you're building the same plane over and over again. The odds are probably pretty good you'll use them over and over again too. But to be honest, this has been a long, eventful winter, and I am really looking forward to the fly-in season. Probably like never before. I am really ready. Ready for the Easter Bunny. Anyway, this is starting to look good. And that's one of the very defining lines of the Spitfire. One of the things that instantly identifies it with, when you look at the drawings and some of the panel assembly, the aileron assemblies and things, it immediately says Spitfire. Well, I'll never forget that on this Easter we got more than just the Easter Bunny. We basically got the top of the wing pretty much ready, I guess. And of course I'll want to look at it tomorrow, see if I want to add anything, take anything away. I always want to make that decision the next day, not right away. But I'd say that was pretty good for a little session that I didn't even know we'd have this session, but we certainly have put that in the bank. And now it's time to have our wonderful Easter 2008. We'll share a few minutes with you. I guess the bunnies, the Easter cards, the festivities. It's a great Easter. Actually, it turned out to be probably could have gone flying today. Maybe the Easter Bunny wants to go flying. Anyway, we're going to go see our neighbors. They're planning a little family cookout. It's our first cookout of the year. Easter 2008. Now, what makes you think Gorgonzola cheese and Easter go hand in hand? How the hell did that ever come to
This is Chris's salad, so...
Hey, Obama's calling you. Get him. It's Obama. Enzo, the Easter rooster. The Michigan rooster.
Okay. Let me take this to your pocket.
It's Easter.
Okay.
Who's your favorite neighbor?
Karen.
You see what I mean? Who's your second favorite neighbor?
Yeah.
Who's your third favorite neighbor?
Rulabelle, it's Easter. Where's your Christian heart?
Is that a rabbit or a kangaroo? Oh my God, what is that? What kind of a rabbit is that? Is that a kangaroo or a rabbit?
That's a rabbit.
That's a bunny. All right, yeah, very nice. Nice job. That gorgonzola cheese really makes it for.
It's in here. It's in here.
It makes a huge difference, right?
Without gorgonzola, it's just not Easter.
Is that true?
I don't know.
I like it though. I
like
it,
gorgonzola.
actually. Yeah, it's delicious.
There we go. There's a man of his own heart. Actually, Mikey is a St. Louis Cardinals fan, our next door neighbor.
That's all done up there already, man.
Cardinals. Mike, did you ever rebuild your Cardinal room?
No, not yet.
Oh, I gotta see that. He had Stan Musial stuffed up there and whatever. This guy really does like his Cardinals. What a guy. Look at this, Cardinals everywhere.
Brand new.
So am I a rabbit or am I a kangaroo? Only you can tell. Phone in your vote. Am I a rabbit or am I a kangaroo? You're right, he does look a little evil. Rabbit, kangaroo, rabbit, kangaroo. Mike, how many hours did she spend making this trifle?
14 hours.
14 hours.
Could we quote you? How many
Chris, how many hours did you take to make this trifle?
The other day, she told me to get lost, but she spends half a day making a truffle over here.
Trifle. I know.
Yeah,
I make a truffle.
That's a truffle, boy.
It is. It's gorgeous.
You know what? She's learning all these evil things from Karen. Karen's the one. Karen's giving her the evil eye here.
Call your daughter and tell her.
Could maybe make a film with that bunny.
Oh, I see. We have a whole bunny.
I got a friend that looks just like this rabbit.
Should I move this one in? Should I move this
There's
one?
another. These
There we
are the
go.
very rare Ukrainian
Wait, hold on,
rabbits
hold on, hold on. They have a whole thing going
from
on.
Carmichael, Pennsylvania. Oh my God. Look at these rabbits.
This trifle is good. Right. See it. Yeah.
You just don't know what the evil rabbit can do. Next time you're inking your plane, the pen will go right through the wing.
Wait, everybody left you here?
The evil rabbit. Yeah, they all left me
They
here.
left you alone here, huh?
With my evil rabbit.
Okay.
I could be a pilot in your next Spitfire. I look just like Joe Adamusco. I'm the evil rabbit of Rutherford. Well, we had a great Easter, and it's a beautiful morning, absolutely. I expect any minute the phone will be ringing and the hogs will be telling me, yeah, you're missing a great day at the flying field. But hey, we have things to do today beyond flying. But the flying season is coming. Oh man, this time of year, it's wonderful to be in this part of the country. Now I always like to, after I've been away for a day or a night, look at the work I did the day before, because this is kind of an artsy thing, and there's always that chance you're going to want to change it somewhere down the road. So once I look at it and I see it the next morning and I look at it and I think, well, I've got enough, but I haven't gone too far and I'm satisfied with it, well, sometimes you're never really happy, but you know what, the good news is you can always add just a little bit or take a little bit away or whatever. But the next step on this, and I may as well start this by doing a little storyboard. We have one little technique that we've used on the bombers and on other semi-scale planes too, of shading in the ink lines. I call it shading. There's probably another word to it. Let me do a quick little storyboard, and then we're going to start shading. Now, one of the first planes we shaded was the B25. Les and I spent a lot of time on that. And somewhere down on this video too, because we're making them oval length, we may be able to put on some of the other little tips that we use for shading. But you pretty much can see how it accents the panel lines on a ship. And I think it's a very dramatic thing. Changes the model dramatically. By the way, this really is Tiger DeStefani's autograph. Warren Walker gave me that. But the shading, just like the inking, it has a very dramatic effect, and you've got to always be aware you just can't go too far. A little bit looks real good. A little bit more, you worry about it, and then if you get too much on, it starts to, I don't know, it just doesn't look the way I like it to look. So I always would rather err on the side, just like the ink lines. If you don't know about ink lines, one not enough is better than one too many. There's a lot of things in life, letrosets, decals like that, but for sure, one of the things, the shading of the paneling lines, which we're going to do next, if you're wrong, do a little bit less, even if it's on a straight line stunner, just do a little less than a little bit too much. And I always like to start by just looking at some of my older videos that have the shading, because we came up with a couple of rules, and I'm going to do these on a storyboard right now, a couple of do's and don'ts. So just as an example, I want to just take a wing panel, and it doesn't have to be a semi-scale plane, any wing panel. You have a couple of defining lines that somehow represent, some of them would obviously attach to the wing spar, some to the trailing edge spar. But in shading, and I'm going to do this in red so it makes sense, all of the shading would represent, on a real panel line, there'd be two pieces of aluminum, and the air would be blowing the little grit. If you've ever looked at how on a real aircraft, when the panel lines join, there's usually a smudge. The smudges would all go from the leading edge back. No, the smudges wouldn't be going forward. They also would be going out. So if you keep this in mind, there'll always be some corners where they join. So, and they would be random. They wouldn't be, you wouldn't take, as an example, this line here and just smudge the whole line. The way you'd rather do it is smudge a little bit here, just to accent it. And again, the less, if you can do it with very little, it's very effective. When you overdo it, I don't know, it loses its effect. Now, as an example, on the ship that has the exhausts, or on a Bearcat, or wherever the exhausts come from, usually there'd be a little bit of a smudge area behind the exhaust. On a Bearcat, it goes up around the wing because of the way the air flows. So sometimes if you're trying to replicate that, it's a real easy thing. Just look at a real aircraft like a P-51 and see what that smudge looks like. But again, on a fuselage, all of the smudging would go backwards, or in the case of a line going horizontally, it would go down. And that would mean that some of the corners, the three possibilities that we're trying to cover here are some of the smudging going down, some going back, and I call it shading for lack of a better word. And when it's done in the right amount, and when it's done, I do it with an airbrush. In fact, I'm going to use Rich Jacobone's really good brand new airbrush. Maybe we'll wear it out on him. But this is something you can, and it's like the other artwork. You need to put some on and then stand back and look at it, and come back the next day and look at it. You really don't see the final presentation until it's done. It's hard to just imagine it while you're looking at it. If you go away for an hour and come back, it usually looks just a little bit different. And because we've done it several times on several different planes, and we have several examples up in a Spitfire room, I think I've developed now. I just look around the cowls of the A26, the exhaust lines, and I pretty much copied that right off a picture, but how dramatic that makes it as opposed to just, well, when a Tiger Cat 2 had a lot of dramatic shading on it. And I think that shading, and even on the white ink, we did white shading. And look around the cowls, that exhausting. A lot of that, I think, added a whole new dimension to the model that wouldn't have been there if we just painted it black. Now, where it works exceptionally well, too, is on a model that's basically all one color or only one trim color, because it adds a dimension. When a plane is very busy, if you had 8 or 10 trim colors like a Midgley plane, it wouldn't be anywhere near as dramatic. But it still would add a dimension that if you choose to do it, I'm going to try to show the little method that I've used, and I think it's worked well for us, especially on these semi-scale planes. So if you follow our simple It's a basic, and let's just pretend we were doing a standard ship. A basic rule of thumb. Any shading should go down. And on a fuselage, any shading should go back. And so if you keep this in mind, and on a wing, shading should go back. And any lines, it should go away from the fuselage. So just having that little idea, I think it just makes it just a little more realistic, even though some people do shade multiple corners or for whatever reason, and it's probably legit, but this way that I've developed and that it works for me, this is the way I'm going to show. And we're going to start just by getting some, and what I've used in the past is black. Sometimes I'd put a little pearl in the black or a little silver to put a little sparkles in it. But either way, a little black will shade that up very, very nicely against the silver and against the red. And using an airbrush and about 15 pounds of pressure. Now here's another thing, and I've heard several other people that tried to do it this way, or succeeded even. If you're going to lay out this ink line, I've done this by just laying a piece of sandpaper. Just let me show. I'd lay a piece of sandpaper here, and then shoot this way. If you shoot this way, what's going to happen is the sandpaper is going to flip up like this, because we're just trying to establish a little bit of a pattern here. So method 1 would be to shoot from the back of the sandpaper. Method 2, you could take 2 pieces of paper. You can hold them, tape them, however it works for you, and then shoot from this corner. But never shoot this way, or you're going to wind up, this edge here is going to get uneven, or some gets on the other side, and then you have a whole nother kettle of fish. Always shoot from the back of the paper forward, and shoot with as little pressure as possible. In my case, about 15 pounds is just about right. Now one final thing, and Al Raby, of course, has a video on how to do his method of shading, which is similar but not exactly the same. But one of the things you could do, and he's done it on tails, in fact on Millie that's upstairs he's done it, he's laid out 1/8" tape on the elevators, or you could even run it on a foam wing, make fake ribs up on a foam wing. And then he just gradually, just ever so slightly, hits that with an airbrush, and when you take out the tape, it has the look of simulated ribs. Now, if I had a solid rudder on a Spitfire, I'd do that, because it would simulate the ribs on the real plane. But since we have real ribs, we don't really have to do that. But that is another way, and by the way, Al has his own little video on how he did his, and he's got a cool way he does the gear doors. Might be worth it to pick that up and check it out. Now here's an interesting point too, is I like to, in my mind, get some idea of how I want to lay this out, or how much shading I want to put on there. But here's the neat part of this, is anywhere along the line, I can just add some. If it looks like I haven't done enough, I can add some. If it looks like I've gone too far, I can always touch up the silver or the red. But it's always a good idea, as we always do, start with the small parts first. And of course I'd always want to do the bottom first, just to make sure that everything, that I got my little rhythm going and my little technique or whatever. And always start by doing just a little bit less than you think is good. You can always add a little, a lot easier than taking some away. And practice on the bottom first. Now I wanted to start with, here's one of the things that I do all the time, is I put tape around the airbrush bottle, because the way I hold it, it tends to get loose and fall off. I'm sure I'm not holding it the way they anticipated. Again, I like to get the pressure low, the material relatively thin, test it on something that really isn't super critical. Now this is one of the parts where this joint is. It's going to have the appearance of being something like an ink line. So I want to just the slightest little bit. Now you never hold the airbrush on the part and hit the trigger. What I do is I get the paint flowing off of the part and then just work my way up. And it can be as random. It doesn't have to be just that little bit. It doesn't have to be that you're covering the whole ink line, just to accent it, just the slightest little bit. Now each one of the ink lines on the fuselage will have that same little, just a touch of shading as we go by. I'll let this dry and see how I like it. Now for whatever reason I've gotten comfortable using sheets of sandpaper, but here's the problem. The sandpaper, because it has a little bit of a grip, tends not to slide around when you're doing this. The other thing, once you get paint on the edge, you either have to wipe it or let it dry, so then you can flip it to the other side, or you can just use another piece. It doesn't hurt the sandpaper. You're still going to have sandpaper when you're done. But in this case now I'm going to start with a smaller part. This is an elevator. And I want to lay this out, and I just want to have the slightest little bit on here. In fact, it's always a good idea to put the glasses on. And I want the sandpaper to actually cover the ink line if possible. Now because this is the bottom, this will be a little bit easier. Now see, if I had a helper here, don't quit your day job. In fact, in this case, it may be easier to do this without the gloves. What I'm going to try to do is just simulate, well, the I don't have a helper thing going on here. I want to tape that up. Try not to get the tape going over the ink lines if possible, but if it does, sometimes you have to go back over an ink line, sometimes you don't. But see, now the way that's covering an ink line, okay? Now it would be really nice, in the best of all worlds, if this were tilted up. But sometimes you have to just think each one through. And this is the trick to doing it, is not to start on there. Start over here. Again, we want it random, and I don't want it heavy. I want just the slightest little bit on there. And even that little bit, it adds a little three-dimensional touch to it. Now the next thing I wanted to do, I wanted to get in this corner. Corner is a whole nother issue. I got some wide tape. You can do it with sandpaper, of course. I just wanted to show some of these different techniques. I like to take the tape, put it up on my shirt. Again, we're not using it like when you do a normal paint job. And it would always be that corner. That would be the one. Now, I'm not going to do individual ribs. So I've got that piece. Now I can kind of hold it. Look at this. I've got, and even with all this thing's still dripping and drooling. You know what happened? That little gasket under the cap is not working the way it should, but well, we'll learn to live with it, that's for sure. Now, again, I don't want to shoot. I want to shoot on the sandpaper, but then just put the slightest, get the tip clean. And that's all. I gotta see if I can get that gasket fixed a little better. That gasket is leaking. But there's one part. One side of one part. Just to get an idea of the difference when one is shaded. Now as I come over to the other side, I can look at the part and I can decide, do I want to make this a little darker, a little lighter? What I want to do here is I want to get that corner. And you can constantly adjust. Do you want a little more, a little less? And I can always hold them side by side and see. And if you're wrong, boy, have I got a cold. if you're wrong, it's always better to be wrong on the bottom, of course, than on the top. But there's no set rule for how much this is. This is all in the eye of the beholder, of course. I need to put a little one out here and around the trailing edge maybe. So what I need to do is, boy oh boy, windy. And you got to be a little creative about how you do some of this masking. Because if you get it wrong, the shading goes somewhere where you don't want it to be. It doesn't really look the way you want it to be. So if I do this, now I want to get some on the outside here. And I need the wide tape here, which I've used about 16 times already, but it doesn't seem to matter. You can just put an edge on it. And like any artwork, there's always a lot of back and forth. Add a little shading, take some away. And in this case on the red, you could always, if you went too far, you can always just go put, well, we don't even have to put the red in the gun. The red's already in the gun. You can just go back and hit this a few times. But we can get it to where we're happy with it. And what happens, keep in mind, when you put the clear on this, the whole purpose of this is to make this look three-dimensional. When you put the clear on this, this is going to accent it even more. It's going to, what I call, pop. In fact, right here, no, I can't get that. I'm getting too cute. And I try to make no two of them exactly the same, of course. I don't want to get to where it looks like it came out of a, you know, a bottle or something. I want each one to look like it's been weathered just a little bit different than the one before it. But I also want them to look symmetrical. There's another side of this. We got that. And a lot of times when you first do this, it looks crude. You say, oh, gee, I don't like the way it looks. Oh, something doesn't look right. When you put the clear on that and buff it out, that really makes everything look nice. I think it does anyway. And of course, constantly looking at the pictures here, you have to remember, when you see a plane, you don't see it under fluorescent light from 2 to 2.5 feet away. You see it from 6 or 8 feet away, and you see it in sunlight. So everything has to be just a little more dramatic under fluorescent light to show out in the sunlight. And you have to kind of look at each piece individually, each part. Now on this part, our lines are going to go out this way. They're going to be a little bit different because we're going to be hitting the trailing edge of this, not the leading edge. So again, because the rule applies that we're always going backwards. So what I'll try to get is the center. In fact, let me flip it and do the bottom first. I don't know why I always forget that. And I don't have to really press the tape down. The tape can just sit on there. But again, this is one of those little building blocks. Once you get the technique down, you figure out the technique, you try it, and then fine-tune it to meet your personal taste. Now, we know we're going to hit the back of this, not the front. So what we really want here is the wide tape. Now I want to get, because again this is going to go off on a corner, I want to get this corner. This corner I don't have to deal with. What I can do is probably do this almost the whole thing in one backmasking here. But as long as you see it, the last couple of days I've had a head cold. It's from not being able to go out flying. Again, there's just a couple of little rules that seem to work well. Now we're going this way. It means that what's going to happen, but we don't want the tape there when we do it. We're going to have to back mask this. We're going to have to do this in 2 steps. Okay, so always good, by the way, good tip. Always hit the airbrush before you go anywhere near a part. Now we know we want some out on the end there. Now this can come off, and even if you only see this once, I think you'll get the idea. And we use that tape over and over again. But again, somewhere on this DVD we're going to dig back and get some of the other ones out where we did the bomber, some of the ink lining, the shading, because I know that's good information, and a lot of the new subscribers that only go back a couple of years have never seen that. Okay. Now here's another thing, as I go back and I see it over and over again for the 5th, 8th, or 10th time, I can notice another thing. I see a little spot where the ink, maybe the tape pulled it up, but I didn't even notice it. I got a little touch up here, but I constantly, right up to the time I put the clear on, I'm looking for little spots to touch up. And that's the one, I think, the best chance you have of getting it perfect. Okay, now this is going to dry. I got to back mask the leading edge, because there'll be a couple of spots in here. We're done with one side of the stab. Now in this case, it's easier to get a curved line in with the 1/8 inch tape. And then I still have to back mask the rest of it with kind of an inefficient system, but at least this allows us to get that curve in there. And I want to get that corner to make it look realistic. And I think if anybody experimented with this, what would be a great prelude to this, if you had an old ship or just an old tail or a wing or something, is just do a little practice thing just to kind of get comfortable with the techniques. Because it's really not difficult, but it's something that well, we want that corner to be accented. That's one thing. Try to make each side just a little bit different, if possible. And doing the top, obviously just redundant, same as the bottom. And then when we're done, we'll set the two parts side by side as if they were assembled with the hinges and just get a look at if we like it, if we want to add something, or again, if we want to take something away. And I just try to look for some balance and continuity in it. Although I don't want it to be too, I want it to be random to a certain degree. Anyway, that finishes up the stab and elevator. And we've got one of the small parts done. Now our next small part, and this is going to be a little more difficult because the trailing edge is going to be accented here and here. And then we're going to actually do the part here. So I'm trying to figure out if I want to, maybe what I want to do is put an ink line down here. Yeah, that's what I want to probably do, is ink this somehow so I can get the accent up on the rudder here. Well, the first thing is we'll take the rudder off. We could think about how we want to do that. And again, I know I need to go up in that corner, in this corner, so figuring out the masking pattern is always the first challenge here. Let's see, do we want to go backward? Let's just do I think we'll do it this way. Sometimes you can't do it in one shot, you've got to, you know. Give me some time to think about how I want to include that rudder in on this. Going backwards. Okay, now the next thing is going to be the front edge of this. Sometimes on a part like this, it's just easier to do it in little bits and pieces. And when we do this side, we're going to have to do this in a little bit different way. I don't want to get this out onto the front. And obviously every piece is a unique thing. And then the last one will be that one down there. Now that one down there. See, this gun is leaking. See, it's getting all over my hand. I have to make a gasket. I'm just too lazy to do it right now. But if I don't do it pretty soon, what's going to happen? It's going to bite me. I know it. It's going to drip on something. What happened? The little gasket up here is leaking, and it's leaking one drop at a time. But okay, now this piece, be nothing on that edge, but only on this edge. And here's what we can do here that'll give it a little accent. We can mask this. Take the razor. Work into the corner. Now I've got to get a little piece in there, I can see that. Okay. Now the next thing is this becomes an ink line of sorts. So this edge here would get some fading, because all the ink lines working their way back are going to have this just a shot of fading there. In fact, we may as well do this side while we're at it. So now I can kind of get an idea if that's going to work for me. Is that going to be enough? This edge here will be a rear edge. That is have a little bit of shading on it. Okay, now the other side, this side here is going to be redundant. We'll do that off camera, then come back and take a look at the whole part. Because the next step on that is I have to figure out how I want to do this rudder. But I want to see, once it's in place with the shaded fin, what's going to... In fact, you know what? While I'm thinking about this, it's a good time to take a coffee break and think about how I want to lay this out. There's obviously something has to get laid out here, just a little different than what I originally thought. I can put a little kink up there. Best to think about it. Now, it's always a challenge to try to get these things equal. And what I really wanted to come up with is how I'm going to do the rudder, but I wanted to think about that as long as possible. And sometimes if you can't come up with a good solution, sometimes it's better off just to move on to the next part, which I'm not sure you're going to do. But it's always good to have the rudder and the fin and the piece together so you can see what they look like as a unit too. Anyway, I hope this is, look at this, this thing's still dripping and drooling. I hope you're getting the idea, and I'm sure you are, how we go about doing this. And I'm not really satisfied yet that I know what I want to do here, so I'm going to let this go for a little while. I have some other shop projects to work on, and when I come back here, I'll have made up my mind, hopefully. Because this is going to be a critical thing when you see it around the edge here.
When you turn and walk away, don't look back. I will remember you just like this.
Oh, come on, pens. We want to be my friend today. Come on, pens. Actually, on the edge here is where usually you get the fingerprints. Whoop. There we go. And it'll allow me to line that up on the other side. Now, it took me a while to kind of figure out how I wanted to do this. I'm not sure this is how I want to do it either, so. But we'll take a look at it. Can't put that on yet. Make sure this isn't dripping. I'm trying to keep track, but I got to make a gasket for this. I'll do this at the end of the day because I'm getting to the point now where it's annoying me that this is drooling all over me. Okay, this one has to go down. And sometimes when it clogs up like this, it's just, you just turn the tip just ever so slightly. There we go. Because here's what's happening. I'm trying to keep it right on the finest spray possible. And so that the aperture is so small when you do that. There we go. Now I had thought of masking off these ribs with 1/8" tape and just shading it, and I had done that once before on something, and I remember I didn't really like it, so. But again, all in the eye of the beholder. Now, but the point is, how is this going to look? The test is, how is this going to look when this is in place? It's going to look okay, I guess. Famous last words. I'll think about it. This is one of those things I'll think about for a while. And the other side, I just have to mask off the little linkage that we have. Now the next step on this is we want to disguise this joint line. Again, everything on the bottom is going to get shaded and around the back. And that should help in some amount disguise it. That'd be easy to just take the cowling off. I don't even have to back mask it. Now I took the time, made up a gasket in here. I'm not sure it's going to work. We're going to find out. I was just getting sick and tired of schmutz blowing all over the place. Now again, we got to get the bottom of this, the bottom edge, front's going to stay, the back will get shaded. And I want it to get right along the edge, if possible. No, it doesn't look like it's dripping, at least for the time being anyway. Now, let me just see if I want to add more shading or not. If I want to add some, do I want to add a little bit? Yeah, I want to add some a little bit along the edge here. Boy, this is sure one of those things that's in the eye of the beholder, that's for sure. Yeah, that's fine. That's good now. Now, it's always easier to start on the bottom of the fuselage and work your way up, because then you're not putting tape over the airbrush. What, baby? Interrupting my session, your airbrush works great. Look at the quality work. You need it. Want to rent it? I'll make a deal with you.
I want to paint my wheel pants.
Bring them over. I'll make you a deal. I'll rent you your own airbrush.
Is that the color you're going to paint it?
Where's the airbrush? Where's your wheel pants? Don't you want to paint them? Alright, so Rich left. Handled all my parts. Got greasy fingerprints all over everything. Basically said the field is in great shape. But he wants me to make a bigger gas tank for the Stuka. He's going to bring that over here tomorrow or the next day. And he's got his big wheel pants ready to paint. If you remember right, when he made these wheel pants, we criticized that they were too small. He didn't agree. So he spent... That's the only thing he's done this winter. Not really, though, because he sold his business and he's all free and clear now. And he's working on his new shop. We may see that in the next week or so. But I got to get back to airbrushing. I got to give him his airbrush back. What I try to do is just evaluate the parts once I get them done one by one, how they're going to look as a unit, a set. But I got to get more work done on the fuselage so I can look at it in total. Now, it was, like I said, I like to start so that the bottom I'm not taping back over the airbrush stuff. Let's see the next thing. I don't know if I can get this in there right now. No, I can't. But I can get this one done. Yeah, I'm ready for the flying season. I'm sure Rich is too. But the fuselage is just a question of repeating everything that we've already done. And it's really a good idea every time you add one of these panel lines to just kind of stand back and take a look at where this whole thing is going. Now this is a lower line here, so that would have shading. This is a front line, so that wouldn't, but this would from the back. Now the next line over, and of course we can just do this one line at a time. We can go all the way up here. But again, I'm working from that side to this side, so. Now, obviously every so often, just a good idea, just stand back. Look at these fingerprints, jackabone. Those are jackabone fingerprints, I can tell. And that's always good, just stand back before we move up, and we're obviously going to move all the way up, one step at a time. Now, it's a funny thing about, I remember this from watching a commercial for the ad that's in the beginning of the HBO movie where they have that city and the camera goes through and they put in all these little details, and the guy that was doing it, the demonstration or the commentary said, even though your eye can't see them, when that camera goes through quickly, it knows there's something wrong. There's no fire hydrants, there's no telephone poles or whatever. And that was something that stuck with me, and I said, yeah, you know, that probably is true about modeling too, because you look at a plane and sometimes you don't even know what's wrong. You just know, yeah, something's wrong with that. That just doesn't look realistic or look right or whatever. Now this will be a tough line to get in. But I thought, just by showing how I'm going about doing this, looks like it's not leaking so far anyway. Now this will be, only the back is going to be shaded. Now up here, this whole line can be shaded. Now what I'm going to do ultimately when I'm all done is back mask around the blisters and then darken up this area here where there normally would be an exhaust stain, but I don't want to do that right now. I want to get all the other shading on there. Now the other thing is we got to do the top. It'll be easier to work from the bottom up. Let this dry up. And I can work let me see how the easiest way to do this. I got to get some paper towels or something to hold this up. I gotta figure some way of doing this. I'm not sure this is going to be the way I want to do it. Is that going to work? Okay, now we know the back is going to have a little bit of shading. Let's see if we can just get this going. Whenever you use this right down to the limit. That tip gets clogged up. I got to clean the tip. Now in this case, what I got to do is tear little tiny pieces of tape up so it can go around a corner, because the fat tape is not going to make an even line. And I don't want to use any of the real sticky tape on this yet. Look at that, it worked so good 5 minutes ago. And of course you can use the tape over and over and over a million times. Doesn't really matter for this. Or you can just hold sandpaper there if you can get a helper. It's always better if you have a helper, of course. But it's a lot more challenging if you don't have a helper. And we're going to show some of the footage somewhere on the end of this, near the end, of working on the bombers or the Typhoon or whatever. I'll try to pick out some footage that would complement what we're doing right now and make it that we have it all on 1 or 2 hours of tape. Okay, we got all those little chippies on it. Okay. Well, the other side is probably not a whole lot different, although I do want to keep that random. I don't want everyone to look exactly alike. Some with a little more in the corners, some with a little less. Now the idea is to try to flip this over on a regular basis and see that we're not making one side too much darker than the other side. And I'm leaving that area up by the valve cover blisters for last. Let's see. Oh, didn't do the verticals. I want to do the corners first on all the verticals. And then I can fill in between, if you're following what I'm talking about. So I want the corners first. Okay, now these can come off. Now we can continue. Otherwise, what happens, you see the edge of the tape when you go out in this area here. And I always liked the way it looked when you go through the insignias, and it had a really defined look. Now this is going to be tricky, I can see that. We gotta find we gotta go backwards. Now whenever you do this kind of a joint, you're on this side. As this gets bigger, the tape isn't going to follow that edge. So I do it in two pieces and then put a little piece just to fill in the gap. when you try to bend one piece of tape around, it just never happens. Now, sometimes if it's your lucky day, of course, you can use the same piece up here. But I think you can see just about how you can lay out almost any pattern here. And obviously we're going to go right up to the front. Now I wanted to try to figure this out, and I'm not sure this is going to be exactly how I want to do this, but I wanted to get where these exhaust manifolds are going to go inside. I wanted to have it to be black, of course. And then I want this to go up. This will be a little tricky because I don't know how I want to have this yet. But I figured I'd outline it with the thin tape. And this is going to be tricky. I'm running into something I didn't anticipate, that this would be difficult to mask off. Maybe I have to do it with all thin tape here first, because the rest of it goes pretty cut and dry. But when you do get an area like this, well, I want that to be black inside. Get that in there. Okay, now that's going to go back. And this piece has to go. It's going to be a little tricky. But each one of these you really have to, well, you got to invent it as you go along, kind of. No, it's going to go up there. Nope, that's no good. But as I always tell Rich Walbridge, if it was easy, everybody'd have a Spitfire. That's what oh, look at this. And this is going to be where the exhaust stain is. So, boy, oh boy, this doesn't want to stick at all. Okay, there we go. Never give up. Take some of this. Okay, now it's going to go around there, up there. Now the only thing is back here. See, I want the material to go. And then we want to have our exhaust stain going back. Now, once we get this far done, we can pull this up and see what it looks like. Alright, let's see what that looks like. Now the only thing I don't like, it's got a fog around this edge, just ever so slightly. So now, when I let this sit tonight, I'll let all this dry up. I've got to make the decision, do I want to add any? Do I want to spray over some of this? I could always spray over it, of course. But I think right now I'm close to having what I really want. But you know what the real test will be? When I come down here in the morning and look at it fresh without seeing it. Because still have to do the wing. The wing is sitting out there. But that's all we're going to get done for today. And we'll hopefully finish the wing tomorrow. And then we can return Rich's airbrush. There's no better day, no better way to start a day off than to feed the birds. Once you feed the birds, it's just so much more fun going down to the workshop. And today's a great day. It looks like it could even be a flying day for Rich and John and whoever's going flying. But for us, there's an airbrush and an ink pen and bird feeders. Where are my birds this morning? They're abandoning me. Abandon you, Windy. Go do the rest of that Spitfire because summer's coming. We're already mating. We're making fledgies for you. You should be out there shooting the rest of that paint. Get the clear on that plane. Let's get flying, baby. All right there. What a great way to start a day. What a great way to start a day. He agrees. Oh, look at this magnificent creature at my feeder this morning. Mr. Blue Jay. See, once the Blue Jays are back, we know summer can't be far away. The robins are back, the Blue Jays, the fledgies, they're all back. Time to finish that Spitfire. Okay, one of the first things this morning, looking at Rich Walbridge's progress on his Spitfire. Now what he's doing here, he made a little bit larger rudder to offset the prop GP from the bigger engine. Looks like the right way to go. It looks pretty close, in fact. But always remember the golden rule. Bigger prop, bigger rudder. That's how it works in the real world. That's how it works in modeling. And you can see that very clearly when you see the real evolution of the full-size Spitfires. Yeah, I think that's pretty good, Rich. I think you're right on track with that. That's going to be a nice looking ship when it's done. See, this is the early model rudder. Now it's good to see the progress Rich Walbridge is making. I'm trying to look at this from a lot of different angles, as I always do every morning before I even get started. And what I did a little shading up on the top of the canopy. This was late last night, just to around the doors. I'm trying to get that I'm comfortable with, well, the way it's looking. Yeah, I think we're getting close. I may want to do something around those valve covers, I'm not sure. But this is what I have to do every morning, is start to look on this and see where this looks too busy and where it looks, well, again, not busy enough. And then picture it all assembled in one piece. But here's one of the issues that I have to start thinking about right now. The front of the wing doesn't have any ink on it. So what happens, it kind of looks like I either forgot to do it or didn't do it. And I'm thinking I want to bring some of these lines, one or two, around the front of the wing, but I don't know exactly how right now. But I'm sure at the end of a cup of coffee I'll know exactly what I want to do. And then we'll be, once I get that, I think get that finalized, be ready to start shading in the wing. Yeah, that's the problem when you do a walk, I call this a walk around. When you look at this in one piece, the leading edge doesn't have any, it's not going to have any shading on either. It's going to look a little, well, it's going to look wrong. Oh. Now, Rich Walbridge made a good point in his email this morning. It sounds like it's not an important thing, but it really is, to have a lot of different eyes look at the ship. Now, in this case, I'm trying to decide, I got some schmutz on there. If I want to divide this in two, that would be 2. Divide it in 3, I think would be the easiest. But one of these, I don't want the lines to line up with the rib lines. It's going to start to look like I just took a ruler and went that way. But the easiest way is always, I think the most convenient way to do this, let's see, we're going to want the ruler on this side. We're going to want the ruler on this side, so I have to offset it. So I'll just slightly offset this. Now if I divided it, I'm trying not to make it look like it's all that symmetrical. Okay, so now if I flip this over, and this is just to look at the possibility of doing it this way. Now to look at it from the front and see if it's straight. Yeah, that I think could work. It will really tie it all together too if I can get these lines on the way I want them to. Now obviously I've got to get out, I got to look at the templates and jigs I have. I'd like to try to do this with the curvable, the styrene, that I can draw one line around the whole piece if I can. Now I have a lot better chance of getting this the way I want it to go around the leading edge, because these are the styrene templates. They bend, and if I go from the big side to the small side, very difficult because the template kind of walks its way up. Now let me just see if I can do this. It's going to be a job. Let's see, probably have to take the flaps off and then lean this up. I have to figure a way I can kind of jig this up. It'll be interesting to see if I can get this in one pass. Yeah, really gonna. Now, we're just gonna let that dry because pulling that template up is gonna be a little bit iffy. I think that's gonna tie it together. But this is the part, going back day after day and looking at it. If you just do it once and then spray clear on it, you're almost always gonna be, a week later you'll say, oh, if I just put a little more shading there, or less shading, or something. And what I didn't realize, because I had been working on this wing from the back mainly, I didn't realize how this leading edge was just bland. But this, I hope, is going to be the final little amount I need. Now, as soon as this dries, in fact, it's dry now. Boy, getting lines to go around the leading edge is a little bit antsy. Yeah, that ties it together. That's the part that, see, that's what I think. That's the part that was missing. Now I got to do this the other 3 times, and then look at it and see if that's enough, or we have to add something or take something away. That's that constant evolution of looking at it and fine-tuning it. And sometimes it's only 1 or 2 lines like that that keep it from being just right on the money. Now we'll see what this looks like when I get the other 3 on there. Then I can make the next decision. Now what it needed 2 things when I was done with the whole side over there. It needed to have a defining end, and I've kind of improvised there. Now it also needs, once I get these lines on, I need to put the fuselage in place, or just estimate where it would normally be. Well, I better put it in place. And it needs to have an end, a defining end to that. And then I think we'll be ready to shade. And I'm glad I looked at this from a lot of different angles, because that would have been something that I would have missed the boat on. Now the lines on the leading edge look like exactly what I had in mind, and here's the only thing left that I really think I need to come up with is some kind of line, and maybe I can pick it up from the fillet to go around the front. I'm not sure. Or maybe this line here. Maybe this line here should stay on an angle. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's what I need to look at right now. And it's not as obvious as you think it is when you think of all the potential possibilities here. You know, I want to maintain some continuity here too, so again, I'll think about this for a while before I act on it. Okay, so after another cup of coffee, I got it jigged up. I want to start laying out some of the shading. Now what I thought I'd try to do is work the shading, start at the wingtip, work my way in, so I'm not constantly putting tape on top of the shaded areas. We'll see if that works as well as I think it will. But keep in mind, this is going to be tomorrow. I may look at it, take some, I can always put a little bit of silver over the black, a little bit of red over it. Getting that final, I don't know even how to explain it, that look that I'm looking for without being too busy, and yet without having areas that don't look like that leading edge. That would have not been good if I didn't have those bars on the leading edge. Piece is going to be the tip weight box. Got to thin the paint. Now, whenever I leave these airbrushes sit overnight, they always have to have the tip cleaned, and I always want to, well, I always want to go buy a new airbrush is what I want to do. Okay, so I need that side again. And we want the back side. Now it's real handy if you can get the thing jigged up like I have here with paper towels and a towel. Now it also means that this side here and this side here will be the shaded side. I'm just looking down. I want to go down on this one here. And we don't want that corner. Like doing a jigsaw puzzle. We need to go back to this one. Now let's see, we want to go down. Got to kind of think this through. Now remember, I'm trying to keep this as random as I possibly can. Now let's see. Get this one. Now I ought to put, and this is just one real cheap way to do this, because I want the flap to be separate. Now if you have a helper to hold it, of course, you can be using sandpaper instead of this painter's tape, but for right now I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. Now, when I get to the flap here, I'm going to back mask, and let's see which. I got to figure out which way this is going to go. Okay, this is going to get back masked, and everything down this side, it'll all come back down. So I've got to. That'd probably be easier to do with the flap off the plane. I'll do that later. So let me just look up here now, and I can get some of this. Again, the whole idea of this is to keep it random, and this would be a hard corner. Any corner that's on the back and on the outside is a hard corner. Anyway, not to belabor this or to just go on and on and on, but because I want to include some of the stuff in here that we did on some of the other planes that have a little bit different techniques. some of the things that would probably be interesting. And I think if you get the whole picture here, this just gets to be redundant. Now we're going to work our way over to the wing. It isn't really hard to figure out where this is going. Now to do the boxes, it's just easier to take them out. And we know the back of this is gonna, let's see if we can do it this way. And we know this edge here. And I know this edge here gets it. Now I like to look at it with the parts right in place so I can just see that I have continuity here. That's the whole purpose of just doing it that way. Now there's going to be this edge here is going to want to get shaded. And I think you can pretty much, again, you can just figure out the basics here. Not that difficult. This is going to get it. We got to figure on nothing in the front. There will be some in the back. If this tape is going to bend the way I want, that's okay. We need a little piece in that corner. Oops. What we need is a helper. A little late in the game to be drafting a #1 draft choice. Anyway, this is one of the parts that I wanted to have shaded effectively, so. Now you notice also that I'm trying to spray, let me just show this. I'm trying to spray this way. I'm trying not to spray flat down so I can get this to shade just the way I want. This is not right. That shouldn't be there. Okay. Now, pretty redundant. We're going to be doing these lines, all the lines fading out this way. But having it up on an angle like this seems to help a little bit. That's kind of a convenient way to do it. But this might be a good time just to take a little break. I want to take a break anyway. I want to put on some of these, and I think they're very interesting things. Some of the things from our previous videos that maybe you haven't even seen or that you've forgotten. And this is some of the first plane, some of the first techniques we tried in doing this shading. I think this is interesting stuff. Anyway, share this with us and then we'll get back to this project. Making a redundant thing on the video. We did get a coat of clear on this though. It should make actually give this a little protection. And I think it'll stick a little better. I'll wipe this with M600, get all extra sets out, and try to finish this up today. Now that I have the other side of this done, what I did is I attached the nose panels and the tail panel. I'm kind of satisfied with that, and that's certainly not exactly scale, but the next thing I want to do is, this side doesn't have clear on it yet, so I have to be real careful. Now just imagine if you wanted to do a totally scale model, every rivet head in scale, every panel line, I don't know that it would even be, I mean, there's just a rivet every 3 inches or something there. So I'm just going to pick out, and I've been looking through the books, picking out like representative ink lines that kind of define where and how this would come apart. That's kind of representative. But again, I've got plenty of documentation, but I can be a little free and easy here since we're not going to ever get judged for scale. And the other thing is the people that judge this at the Nets, they may not even know. I mean, you know, they don't have a picture of it. So, and even if they did, who would care anyway? Some more documentation. So we're just going to lay out, I guess I'm going to start with the main line that goes down the whole fuselage. And since our fuselage isn't perfectly scaled, that line can't be exactly right, but to give it the illusion that we're looking at that type of break apart. Now what I typically do, and I'll start, just you really can't pick anyone, but the most definable one is right above the wing. I lay it out where I want it with 1/8 inch tape, and then I can move it to the 90 one way or another. The other thing is to have a really flexible ruler, one you can bend around corners, around leading edges. Put the tape on this side. This just happens to be one I've used. Use it for rivet lines, and also by laying it out into, you can kind of look at the drawings and say, gee, does that look representative? Is that close? Not close? Are we gaining on it or losing or whatever? Once I'm happy with it, then I'll just ink around each one individually. A lot of times it's hard too to figure out which of these ink lines you'd want to do first. Well, because this line comes from the stab and breaks, I want to have that line in there, and then I can draw from the cockpit back and connect the dots.
But just then, and it, oh, there it goes. As I say, be careful not to knock it over. Now we have the first two top, these are going to go, these are kind of definable. They're on all the models. I want to use this as an ink line. I'd like to disguise it as an ink line, so I'm not going to put that ink line in. Now the next one I want to lay out is going to go from about the center of the stab to this line, then stop. And it's not a straight line. It has an angle, and it just about touches the top of the gunner's station. So I can lay that out in tape, kind of figure out where I want that line. And the main thing is it's not a straight line. It goes down to that line, and that's why I put that line in first, and then tapers down, goes over the top. So it'll kind of give us, that'll probably be the most definable line we can put on the plane right now. And if that one's right, the rest of them will all kind of fall into position, I think. Like this, I want to pick up the stab line, so this is going to look like it's really doing something here. Prototypically, it just touches. In fact, it does touch. I should lower this just a tad, and it would be perfectly scale. Whoa. Now that kind of holds this. Of course, I don't have a helper, so that's not a big deal, but something we need to take into account. I start at this ink line. Pen as 90 degree to the work as possible. The ink seems to flow over this B25 silver color very well, which is a pleasant surprise. Usually on metallics it can be a little bit of a problem. This color looks fine now. So now we have another one of the definable lines. We're using this one as a definable line, so we won't even touch that one. So we got to do the one up, carry that forward to the cockpit now. That completes that ink line. I let it sit behind the cockpit because I don't know where that line is going to wind up. I let each one dry individually. And from this point on, we just have to do the same thing over as try to represent. What I like to do too is flip it over and do the other side as soon as possible, so it's fresh in my mind where these lines lined up with. What an airbrush can be, if you get it on too dry and you go to put tape on top of it, you run the risk of pulling the paint up, and we are running that risk. But I will try to get this on wet. If you see a lot of sandpaper looking overspray, you know you're not getting it on wet. It's got to look bright and shiny when you're done. Now while this is drying, I've tried to plot out a day here. While this is drying, I think I'll be able to ink the tail. I touched up those spots yesterday, got the minimum amount of paint, I hope the minimum amount of paint. Now a good test is to make sure everything is wet looking. If it's wet looking and there's not much overspray, you're probably going to get at least a reasonable bond. Okay, now that'll have to dry. I like to let it dry overnight while that's drying, and the wing too, of course. We'll try to get some ink on that stab and elevators. Now in doing the ink on the tail, of course we can't make it exactly scale, but we can get a rough idea of what this looks like from several angles and make it similar to that. Now one of the things we can do on the elevators is simulate the ribs, of course. Some of these show that the ribs are simulated, some are not. Now I wonder if, and I really don't know, if some of these stab and elevators were fabric covered and some were metal covered in later models. I'm not sure about that. But the truth is we have plenty of choices, and we're just trying to make it look similar to a scale model. I'm not going to try to make every rivet and every detail. I want to make it as close as I can, but just with the flavor. Now this is probably the best blueprint I have because it shows all the little rivet details too, and we can do some rivets, we can do some lines, we can ink in the trim tabs. So the easiest thing for me is I always start with an easy part. The elevators are an easy part to do. And it's, again, we're trying to do this because we have time, we're waiting for our silver paint to come. And well, the insignias need to dry overnight, so I'm trying to use little fill-in jobs that'll get me a little bit ahead. I can do the red here. I actually could put a couple coats of clear on this and get that clear drying. Help us get the flavor of this, especially for this joint. That the rudder joint is kind of a definitive thing. I want to make sure I get that right. But this gives us some idea of what this should look like. Alright, so let me get the parts, wipe them down with M600 and get started. Now some of the tips that work well for me anyway is I always like to start with a small part, because what happens with this kind of a job is after you do 6, 8, 10 hours of it, or some amount of hours of it, you get very comfortable, but in the beginning you're not, at least I'm not. And so I need to work on my technique. So the obvious thing is work on the bottom, work on the elevators, work on something that it won't be real critical if there's less than perfect results. Bottom of the stab, bottom of the elevators, but then the top, say the top of the wing, the top of the fuselage, you'd really like that to be perfect. So getting the parts clean, step one. Get all the fingerprints off and the bird prints. Hey! Look at this. Look at this. Get out of here. Get the bird prints. Hey! I have what I call my ink line drawer. Of course, a set of rapidograph pens. These are really Mike's pens. I marked the date that I bought the ink, so I'm not using up 10-year-old ink. And always use the ink that says it's for film, not paper. This is for paper and film, I'm not sure. But if it doesn't say film, it'll be more difficult by a giant amount. Now, I always have all the little things I need to do inking, the little rulers, the little templates. I make plywood templates for a lot of different, this was for one of the Spitfire ailerons. Different, I save them all, no idea why. Parts of the other planes, parts of the gear doors. But anyway, I always look through here because a lot of times before I make a part, I remember 10 years ago I already made it. I also save all the old ink. Now the white ink, different ink. The best ink I found though is the stuff that comes, this is for sure, it's black India ink, it's rapidograph, and it says for film. The number is 3080F. That's what I found to be the best. Now, just to eliminate a couple of possibilities, I went to the store one day and bought every kind of pen you could imagine to see if I could do inking with these the pens that already have the ink in them. Not even worth going any further. Not even worth going any further. I always keep the old pens because a lot of times I like to do little experiments or set them up with different combinations. I tried to make gray ink one time by mixing white and black. I didn't want to mess up a good pen. So what I'm suggesting you do is just keep, and of course we have the most embarrassing thing of all, our original box of pens that now has no pens left. Every one of them is either destroyed or we can't get ink to flow in it. So don't think for a minute like doing ink is the favorite part of my job, of building a plane. But it's a part you have to resign, at least I do, to doing some anyway. I have a couple of my own pet little theories anyway about ink. If you're in doubt about ink, one ink line not enough is better than one too many. Also, I like to do the ink work in several different thicknesses of pens. If you do it all in the same thickness, a 6.0 is good. That's a good medium-sized pen. But what happens if you don't? If you do it all with one pen, it kind of looks like, yeah, I don't know. Like, what did he do? Just peel this off or something? So, one size pen, the bigger ones for rivets, the smaller ones for correcting little errors. I'll start the beginning of the tail, try to get in the rhythm here, with a 6.0 pen. Looking at my material, one of the things I always have a piece of paper handy for just testing the pen. Because from time to time it won't flow ink, and you need to hear that little check valve rattling. And like I said, the biggest thing I've found is it just takes a little bit of time to get in the rhythm. Once you're in the rhythm, seems like it goes quickly. This pen may need to be refilled. Refilling it can be a messy at best job. Yeah, it looks like it's still got ink in it. Now, years ago I used to try to clean the pens at the end of every season. I've kind of given up on that. It's such a messy, time-consuming job. And like I said, ink, I really am embarrassed to even be showing you what I know about ink, because people that I know, like Steve Busso or Bob Martens, they just work with these pens like, whew, like nothing. And for me, it's an ordeal to get the ink to flow and not do silly things. First thing I do is over the edge. I want to get the last line, and I use the tape as a little bit of a reference line. Now I also want to just figure something out, and I don't know if these lines are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12. We need 12 ink lines here within 10, so we need them to be about 9/10 apart, just roughly anyway. So what this is going to allow me to do is go 9, and just get a look at this. Because this will give me at least, the idea is to make it look scale without having to be scale. If we were building a precision scale model where they'd count the ink lines or measure them or whatever, it'd be a whole different ball game. But in the case, and this is just one small part, and I like to lay it all out before I ever put ink on a pen, or ink on a pen, pen on a paper. As William Shakespeare said. Okay, the last one doesn't have to be, in fact it is bigger on the last one does have a wider gap. Okay, now we need to do the same thing down here. Well, once you have this, then it's only a question of just connecting the dots. Or in this case, if we were going to do this over and over and over again, if the whole plane was like this, I'd make a template up 9/10 thick. But laying it all out, I need to do now the first thing, and I don't want to forget it. I need to do the trim tab. Because the trim tab wraps around. So now that we have the ribs laid out, now I can count in as 1, 2, it's in the third to the 6th. So it means this, these 3 are now the trim tab. So I'll make a little, because I want to get the trim tab in first and then do the ribs around it. It just makes it easier to do it that way. 3rd to the 6th. Now I'm going to make a little template to do one side of the trim tab, flip it over, do the other side. So I'll have the trim tab in place before I go any further. I could just estimate and make a little pattern for the trim tab. And now I'm going to cut this out and put tape on the opposite side so that I have a way of holding this in place. Every time you make a little pattern like this, you have to keep this up off the part that you're inking, otherwise the ink tends to run underneath. In a way I've done that, and it's not really high tech. 3 layers of 1/8 inch tape almost on the edge. Again, I'm not going to show this for every time I make up one of these little patterns, but we're going to make several up in the course of building a model. Kind of looks like it ties in better that way. I'm going to do something very similar to what we did before, I want to outline everything in tape, and then I want to make a perimeter and then run rivet lines here. I thought that would be kind of in keeping with the spirit of what we're trying to do. So I can do most of this off. We've already seen that technology. And we'll get a rivet making tool. It's a ruler that has the markings on it for the rivets that we're going to use. The first thing is I'm going to outline my boxes. Now I just want to make sure that I can, yep, the ruler will fit, because I'm not going to do the middle, of course. Now what I did, I put a towel on the workbench just to protect this as I go along. Again, most of this is redundant. It's going to be exactly the same as that, in fact, once I lay this out. The tape is a good tip. That seems to work for me. And once I finish the boxes, I'll use that line to actually lay out the rivet lines. And it adds a little interest to the plane that it's not all the same. When you notice I did the little tab in a much thinner pen. This is done with a little bit thicker pen, and I double lined it. Well, that kind of, to me, it adds interest, that it makes it a little more three-dimensional, a little more realistic, however you want to define it. And it's easy to practice. Just practice on, you know, light bulbs or pieces of paper, fuel cans or something, until you have your little technique down pat. One of the benefits is it adds almost no weight. And if you ever have to repair, this gives you a break point where it's easy to match the repair. It won't be as obvious. It's never too soon to start doing little touch-ups. And I see a couple little spots here that probably the tape has pulled up. Usually it's right on the corner of the edge. Before I put clear on this, I'd like to go over it and anything I can correct. And usually there's always some little spots. Now I just think as many times as I do this, the lighter I could get this on, the better. Because don't forget, you could always go back, remask it, of course, and make it a little bit darker if you wanted to. We did a lot of this on a Typhoon. Everybody seemed to be, well, like they enjoyed seeing it. Time for some clear to see how this is going to pop out. Day after Passover, it's just an unbelievable day. I can't believe it. We're going to try to get some clear on these parts. Take advantage of this nice weather, because we've had a lot of rain lately. See how many baby fish we have? We can't even count them. God. And the big breeders have all gotten bigger over the winter here. Take advantage of a day like today when you have some painting. Oh. Now I always like to just very carefully start with the bottom of one of the elevators. The amount of clear that's going to go on this is going to be 2 quarts of clear and 2 quarts of thinner and maybe some extra thinner. But I'm trying to keep, especially on the tail, the minimum amount of paint. I'm going to try to do this in as little paint. Let me get this in the sun here. Boy, if you've never seen Miss Ashley Red, the first day you put the clear on it, you want to hug it and kiss it. Or as we say around here, thank you, John Brodak. And I hope this week or next week we're going to get the silver to actually finish the plane. They're still working on that down at Randolph. And hopefully that'll be available to everybody who's... Ooh, look at that layout. Not sure you can see the kind of... Yeah, you see the way this is spinning on a wire. I really can't flip it up. To see how this part is going to, once we get a little bit of clear on it, the color really comes right to life. And the shaded areas seem to make the lighter areas just look even more defined, and that is one of the defining parts of the B25, is that hinge line, that sawtooth hinge line. Now I'm really being careful not to get a whole lot or even any extra clear on this tail section, because I know I'm vulnerable now. This model is consuming just hundreds of hours, but it really is something a little bit different and a little bit, in my eyes, it's as exciting as it gets. Now, one of the things that I would never want to do if I had a choice. See, the thing is, if we live in an all perfect world, I never want to airbrush paint on where I might have to put tape over it. So when I backmask this leading edge and the stars, things that are airbrushed, what I want to be real careful to do is to take a lot of the tack out of the tape, rub it on my shirt, whatever. Again, I really hope you've enjoyed watching this and maybe picked up some tips you can use. The tape run to the end. You know, there's models I've built to compete with. There's models I've built because I thought on a competition level they'd be better. And I've made models to try to make them with the minimum amount of time and effort. But this for sure has been the most, well, the most interesting, the most exciting. I don't know, even Karen has told me, you know, I just seem wound up all the time here coming down to shop working on this. It's given my whole life another dimension that it wasn't there before. And of course the hard thing is, after a project like this, what do you do next, the next model that you build? So we're already thinking about it. And now I just went outside, did a little test, painted a light bulb with clear, and we are at 99.9% humidity, and I don't want to run the risk of putting any, it really could be spraying clear the next couple of days, but I'm really at a point where I don't want to risk it. I put so much work into this, I just don't think it's really worth even, I'm just going to wait for a day when the humidity is down. You know, now I could be inking, but I'm saving the ink work on this for a day that I have a dedicated day. I don't have shop work. I want to do it on a weekend day if possible. Because what happens when I start inking and I have to keep my hands clean and things like, I don't want to be doing this and then running a drill press and making carbon gear and things like that. So I want to save this for a dedicated day. And what happens now is, when I get to this point, I really have to start showing some patience. And I'm really itching just to get out and just finish off the clear and get the buffing. But there's just a point at which you have to show some patience, and I'm at that point today. So what I've decided to do is, because we're looking at maybe having a weekend flying session this weekend, I'd like to get the pavement gear for Miss Ashley done if I can today. Do the hinging, of course. That's a whole nother day to hinge.
For you. I know that's significant. That's your mother.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man.
Check out that. You can pick the fuselage right up.
You want me to put gloves on?
No. You can pick the fuselage right up. What do you think? You're at Jack of Bones' house?
Well,
See how this Brodak silver looks? You know that? It's a lot brighter than the other, the traditional, whatever we want to call it. Heavy, huh?
heavy. Too heavy, man.
Too heavy.
Not an elevator weight for sure.
I know you like the fuselage.
It's like a free flight.
Yeah.
My goodness, man.
So do you give your approval there?
Oh, yeah, this probably weighs about 3.5 ounces. Maybe not even that. My goodness.
It's a shame we don't have the bigger wing. That's the only thing that's going to be a...
Well,
But it's too late. Yeah, I wouldn't make the body any bigger. You're the co-pilot, so if it crashes, you're in big trouble.
Old Gazorian.
If it doesn't fly right off the body. You like the way the windows came out?
Mm-hmm. You have the touch for that.
That's all Brodak, baby.
What are you going to use for 50 calibers?
You're going to make some out of carbon fiber tubes. I know a guy like you that sits and whittles stuff like that away. I got some carbon fiber tubing.
I don't know. Do you really need them? Yeah, I guess so. What angle of attack would you put on?
I don't know. Shooting at the judges wherever they are. Or maybe thanking them. I don't know.
So, how many coats on here? Or is this buffed? This is done.
No, it's not buffed or done or anything. It's ready for the rest of the clear. Uh-oh, Chicky's attacking.
I know he likes my...
oh yeah, he loves you.
He wants to build a nest up there.
Yeah, he sees nesting materials. Nesting materials. Chicky lunch is served.
I don't do anything quick or rash, but that red, yeah. You know, it looks better with clear on it than just the...
Well, you know what the weather's been like lately. We've just been crazy with this weather.
Okay, Chicky.
This is the only part of the plane that's buffed so far is the stab and elevators. Everything else has got to be buffed. Okay, so you think Downey's going to be impressed? You think he'll like it? You think he'll like that nose section?
Yes.
I can't wait to finish it. I'm really itching. We want to peel this back. And now the trick is using a ruler to connect the dots. Always try to have some tape holding the ruler if possible. That lets me get a better alignment. In fact, this one is not aligned. Okay. Again, if we can capture the flavor of this without making it a rivet for rivet replication, I think we can. Now, I'm not sure this is going to be exactly how I want it, because the leading edge has a couple of span-to-span joints that I want to try to replicate if I can. But I always find it easier to just lay out a box to work in before I do anything else. Otherwise, I'm just like it's like building a house in midair without a foundation. I don't have a reference point. Remember, we're going over the gull part of this wing, which is another factor that makes it difficult. Just right here, it's difficult. In fact, I'm going to have to use a flexible ruler down there. This last piece, the gull part of it, is a problem. So I can go right about up to there, and then the pen starts coming off the Still no problem, nothing we can't work around. As that bows down, the hard ruler wouldn't let me connect the lines as accurately as I'd like. Now this is another alternative, is just use the flexible part. Even though it would be nicer if you could do it in one shot, of course. The thing with all inking is it's a compromise of what you can do when you're going around curves and edges. Now, even though we don't have good corners on this, because it's just difficult to get the corners right at this point, the best thing is to just let them dry. If you look at these corners, you'll see they're kind of uneven. Right now, that doesn't even matter. Once that dries, I can take a brand new blade. Not sure if you're going to see how this... First it has to dry. You can't do it while it's wet. And just basically make a corner. Oh, I know that's a little bit too big up there. Now, even though you see the scratch marks on the silver, what'll happen once the clear hits that, you won't see that at all. I laid out one of the span lines just as an idea of just to see how I would like to do this. Get a feel for it. Now I want to lay out the midline and the midline this way. I'll measure it off, of course, make sure it's accurate. Again, I put a little dot on my dimension so that I know this is where I want it and it's equal. Just carefully clean up the corners, little spots that inevitably get in the corners. This line is that kind of central line that goes almost all the way down. You can see what I've done is just let that dry. Now, just to start off, because I don't want to get, again, at that magic thing of one too many ink lines. That looks very, very close to what I had in mind. And I don't want to push it by starting to put too many details in here. I want to try to have similar things so that from, you know, from in a mind's eye, in a distance, it has that look. Now the little section in between the nacelles, a lot of these lines continue on in, and I'm going to just do, and I'll do it off camera, just something. I'm going to make it as close to being what that drawing is, but I don't want to get carried away here if it doesn't look, because don't forget, this is not a scale wing. That adds another variable into it. But having the books, having lots of drawings, having lots of ideas is always a good idea. Now I think what I'm going to be able to do, if I'm really lucky, and I'm never lucky, is use this on that side. Actually, may be able to use it 4 times. Now that worked out just about as well as I could expect. This is a straight line here. I'll use my flexible rule on that. And then I need to continue these lines on through the nacelles and out the other side. Almost like there's an imaginary thing going on there. In some areas, obviously you can't get a ruler in there conveniently. Rather than make up templates, I can take one of these green guys that's real flexible and just hold it with my bare hands. The in-between is just very difficult to get in there, and now I need to continue this line. And what I did, I lined it up with the back of the gear door, so I'm going to have to put another bend in this. And this I'll just have to do by eyeball, lining up with that, which looks pretty scale. To be honest, this looks a lot more scale than I thought it would. The trick is not to make it too busy. Once it gets too busy, it starts to look like, I don't know, like something unrealistic. Now a quick look at that, and a quick look at my book, and I think I'm really close to what I wanted, what I had envisioned. I'm figuring out, while I'm inking the other panel, again I'll do that off camera because it's going to be exactly a replica of that. I want to figure out how to put the bomb door in realistically, or as realistically as possible. Again, this part of it, I wish there was another way to do it, but just very time consuming, and now I want to figure out when I do my shading and highlighting, this will really accent it up nicely, I think. And there's a couple of things like the fuel drains and some of the other little scoops and things that we can simulate with ink. But again, I'm going to just work on it. I know I've got about 3 days to do this. And the trick is, just don't, when you get to the point where you think you need one more line, that's probably the part where you don't need an extra line. Too much ink, just, to me, just, once it gets too busy, it's a problem. As a quick example, this is a plane that I know I wasn't happy with. When I got done inking this, none of it made sense. Like, there's things that don't make sense. In the back here, what is that? What is that supposed to be? Yeah, I don't know. I was very disappointed. It just didn't make sense that ink was there. So now I've been more discriminating in where I put an ink line. And if you like I said, if you miss one and don't have one, I don't think anything bad happens. When you have one too many, oh. Again, none of this is realistic. That's not what an airplane looks like when you take it apart. Even not that anything we're doing is super realistic, but here's a good example of what not to do. I mean, what would that possibly be? What was I thinking? See? What was that, an Allen bolt holding the fuselage together? I mean, I don't know. So, I've come to my own little baby conclusion that if I'm wrong, I want to be wrong with one not enough instead of one too many. One of the planes I was real happy with, and Joe Adamusco, I mean, his ink work is flawless, just absolutely flawless. I was really happy with the way this looked because it just was enough. It just didn't go over the edge, over the top. And when I was done with it, and of course it won the concourse, so that I couldn't have been totally wrong. Well, that isn't really a test. Anyway, these two I was real happy with the ink work. And I think as time goes by, I'm doing less lines, less work, but they have to be more realistic. That's the direction I want it to go in. Ashley has a very limited amount of ink, especially on the fuselage, but every one of them is something that represents a real panel line or a whatever that I really think that maximize the amount of time and the amount of ink that's on it to be as realistic as possible. And the Typhoon, I think, was one that I was happy with anyway, that it just didn't go that extra little bit where it started to look unrealistic. Just enough panel lines, just enough shading. And that's a hard thing to define how to get it. It's almost like just put them on and at some point in time you know you have to stop. Now I'm well into the final part of having this inked. Looking at anything else I might want to add. Again, I'm being real careful not to go crazy with the ink. I just don't want it to get too busy. I want the focus to be on that nose section and on the cowls. I don't want this to steal attention away from that. Now, I don't know if I'm going to put any or some riveting on this because, again, I'm real conscious of the fact that I don't want this to get too busy. See, some of the drawings you can see have different kind of inking patterns and lettering, riveting patterns. And what happens is once it gets too busy, it starts to look like that a dumpster plane that I keep a picture of around. And the reason I keep a picture of that is what not to do with an ink pen. I think this is more effective, it looks more realistic, and it lets the model look like a quality instead of a quantity model. And again, I want the focus to be, this is the focus of the plane, is the nose, the turret. The front part of that is where I want your eye to be drawn, not to the wing center section or to the part out here. But once I put it all together in one piece, if I see I need to add a little detail or add some shading, because before I put the clear on, I'll assemble the whole model, and then kind of like I guess like an artist would look at a painting and say, you know, what do we want to do? Add something or take something away? But so far, I think at least I'll have overnight to think about this relative to drawing. Now I want to look at the Bombay doors. I can't make them totally scale, but boy, can I get them close. Because right here is where they would end. They would start here, end here. So I can lay out the Bombay doors in tape and use that as, get that done as the next step, because I'll have most of the stuff on the bottom done then, and hopefully at the end of today I'll have the bottom finished up. Okay. We'll just see how much we can get in one stroke of the pen here. Trying to make them even, so we measured forward, and at that point in time Les said, "What? Why didn't you build a cardinal?"
That's exactly right.
Okay, you got it?
Well,
you're the hold guy, I'm the ink guy. See, I get the easy job.
We're close.
The senior partner.
Eliminate. All right. Now, if you can draw. I had no idea it was hurting that much for.
Now, what do you think? Have we reached the point where we ought to flip it over?
I think that's that is saturation.
This is why I like having two sets of eyes around, especially somebody who's got a conservative point of view, not somebody, you know, somebody like Ski Dombrowski would just be saying, yes, flip it over. I think so. I think we're ready to flip, because we have to connect these lines now. We have to play
And
connect the dots.
That'll set you up for the top as soon as we do that.
I think the Bombay door stands out enough. The gear doors stand out. Okay, let's flip.
All right.
Now we do have.
You know what? It ain't too bad going back the other way either. I would say you could use the same one.
If you keep it, if you reference this line here and try to keep that, I think we'll be close enough that it'll look scale.
And you know, there's some flexibility in this thing. You can play with.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we want to. Now you just want to determine. Do you want to end it at the de-icer boot? See how it ends on the real plane? It kind of. We don't have that fillet. That's the problem.
That's right.
That's a scale fillet. If we had a big fillet, that would be easy. So I think we should just kind of end it and let it go out into the de-icer boot.
Either that, or you could carry it just a little bit further and draw a line into the de-icer.
Okay, into the de-icer boot. Yeah, instead of trying to make.
This apparently, this seam line here goes right to the leading edge fillet. So if you, without the fillet, you draw it to the leading edge.
Let's go to the middle of the de-icer boot and see how it looks.
Yep.
You don't need the back now because we have half.
Don't need the
we smudged up the whole front of the line.
Yeah.
That's all you need is from here. Let this just dogtail back. This is dry.
All right, now that's got to come over a little bit more.
I just want to get right there.
All right, let's give that a try.
Yeah, we're not matching up as well as we should, so
Not at all.
that's not going to make it. Okay, let's wipe that. Now, whenever that happens, of course, there's a very easy solution. When you get it early. Okay, now let's, you know, if you don't show these mistakes to people, then they think when they have a mistake, oh, yeah, where if they see every, see, how many times do you do this before you get it right? Well, that's okay. Nobody knows. Okay. Try 672. Take, outtakes. Oh, yeah, okay. I think we may have to put more tape under this piece of plywood.
Well, why don't we do it now before
we
wipe it?
See, we only have two. Oh, there's only 2 layers on here. That's what's happening. You have this, and I'm trying to show religiously that no matter how careful you are, unless is a true expert ink man who
I'm being oversold here, folks.
Yeah, I hope. And you want to buy a used bridge? We'll sell you Les McDonald's home phone number. All right, here. A couple extra layers of tape. And you could bet on the next shot we're going to have this perfect. Billy Mitchell's going to come right over. Hey, you know, 3 days ago was the day of the anniversary of the Tokyo raid.
Is that right?
And I'm looking on TV the other night, and there's a movie called Tokyo Raiders. So I go and record the movie. I turn it on, it's some Oriental movie.
Oh,
you know, with Kung Fu and everything. Oh, man. They should make that against the law. Okay, now we have extra tape on this side. Let's put it on both sides. Otherwise, this thing tends to bend like a pretzel.
You know, I'll tell you something. If you could invent something that would bend like a pretzel, but evenly.
Yeah, evenly, yeah. Well, that blue thing didn't turn out to be all it was. Now, Les hasn't had good luck with that in his inking career, too.
Not on a drawing board.
Yeah.
It just does not bend, give you a nice even...
Yeah, but a lot of times a tool looks like you say, wow, that's going to work perfect, and when you try it, you know, or the opposite, it doesn't look like it would work, and yet it's perfect.
It's funny because for most of the model airplane drawing that I've done, you know, 35 and 60 size ships,
right.
Even the curves are pretty subtle, but you can buy relatively inexpensive ship's curves.
Oh, sure.
To do that, you know.
Now we have extra tape. Now we're going to get this on the next shot. Guaranteed. Les guarantees that in writing. Like I said, Les said we're going to get it in within 2 shots. I'm running out of Q-tips here. Okay. But that's the way this, and without this line, I don't, you know, it loses a little bit.
Loses a lot.
And we're not looking to, you know, be the first guy to the finish line. We want to be the best.
All right, you get your line on the back. Okay. We're about where we were in the front. Okay. Now it just, if you can, Wendy, can't the pen, shoot.
Take it away. We'll do it again.
What happened? See, it's crisp, but I don't know
no,
what that is.
No, we're going to put more tape. Yeah, your fingernail was there. That's okay. This is what makes it, you know, that everybody in the world can do, because they'll say, gee, I can do that better than Wendy, and they're probably right. Okay, last chance, saloon. Lose the fingernails.
Right.
What's happening? See, because we're curving it that way.
Yeah, we're forcing the edge
down. If you just put one finger there, just one there, that's all we need.
That's all we got.
Now, see? Okay, let's try this.
What's causing that?
We may have to put 10 layers of tape under this to get it done. It's because it's bending down in that dimension.
See, we're getting closer and closer to leading edge here.
Yeah, pretty soon we're going to be on the table. Okay, but that's no problem either. But we'll do it again. I'm going to put more tape on it. Because we got to do this 4 times, so let's...
Yeah.
Why don't we learn it right now?
Yep.
We go to inking school here.
Get the equipment right, and then...
Inking 101. We're going to put 10 more layers of tape.
The other 3 will be fine.
Believe it or not, how many tries did we legitimately do?
After the first one, it was a piece of cake.
Oh, yeah.
But the first one was a bear.
Okay, so now we have all the lines that normally define the nacelles. And the line, show me again here. The line between the 2 dihedral breaks is straight, but then it cants forward?
Right, right. From here to here.
It's a straight line.
Right. There are all straight lines across the middle, and then breaks to the rear following the slant of the leading edge.
Okay.
But it's interesting. You can see how the airplane, you know, how it was engineered.
Yeah, that's probably right on a spar. Obviously, that's the wing spar. Okay, so we need to get a line.
We need to get the line.
Define a line between the
here.
nacelles.
Right.
Okay, between the two dihedral brakes.
Right.
Between the two dihedral brakes, and we've laid out the dihedral brakes with 1/8" tape, and Les is going to try to put some indentations into the nacelles there as he presses the ruler.
I'm trying real.
This way, every dent in this plane I can blame on Les. As soon as his hands touch it once, every fingernail mark is his problem.
You got it.
Now that goes right. We should put in the two dihedral brake lines first, because otherwise we're working in midair here.
Yeah, but what I want to do is, see, now I've got to guess that when you put this in, this is at a right angle to the.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's
so
exactly.
Now if we extend this out to the.
We'll measure to the trailing edge. Measure down, and you'll see if it's off a 1/64 of an inch.
Yeah, but the trail. Okay, that's to tell you the truth, not what I'm concerned about.
Because that's a defining line. That's the wing spar. I'm sure that's the center wing spar. That's the reason it's 90 degrees.
Yep, sure is. Right.
Was that accurate?
Right on the money. Right on the money.
What a surprise. The only thing on a plane that's a straight line. The only straight line on this whole plane.
Yeah. Just to double check something. That the triangle came wrapped in.
I know exactly what you're thinking.
All right.
He's using a 90 degree. The ruler off the bell crank mount, and then a 90 degree to get the dihedral brake lines 90 degrees.
I'm not getting help from Chicky. What has she got?
I think he just pooped on you.
Again?
No, we got to go over the nacelles. That line goes right over the nacelles.
Yeah, but we got to do this before we put that midline in. We got to put the brake point.
Okay, right. You need the brake point. Okay. Plus, we have a 90 degree line here. And Les has conveniently enough put a 90 degree line that we can use for a reference. Now, when it comes to some of these parts, like this one right here, where we're trying to get the main spar inked in, we have a line that is a 90 degree reference, because don't forget the leading edge and the trailing edge of this, they both taper, so it's a double pain in the neck. You can't reference off the leading edge or the trailing edge in either case. For that main spar, now you've got this is going to be a prototypical line, so we want to get this right. If we're main spar, what we're going to do is measure forward, because this is a 90 degree line. Measure forward the distance that we've scientifically evaluated and computerized, and it looks like it splits it right in half.
It does.
So just measure it and go by the half.
Right, exactly. Let's cut it right in half, this distance and then that distance. And that'll be the line.
And that'll take, we can put a little dot on the tape, and just connect the line. It skips some of the panels though. Measuring up, making a center line, a little template, so that we can get the hatch. I guess that's some kind of a hatch on a real plane. Get that centered, then we can lay out the template using that for the center line. You're pretty good. I didn't know you were this good. If I knew you were this good, Chicky poop on you twice a day.
That's good, yeah. That's good.
Yeah, if they were off even a little bit, you'd notice it and it'd look terrible. Okay, so now what do we need? We need the other half of the main wing spar?
Yeah, well, we have a wing spar that goes literally from tip to tip. That's a straight line along about here.
Okay.
So that, this kind of detail.
Yeah, the little boxes and little
trim tabs and hinge line.
Most of that'll be on the flaps, and I think what we did is we have some of the lines much thicker. These are 120s, these are 60s. Kind of a variety of line thicknesses to make this look as realistic as it possibly can. It certainly gives the illusion of being scale without being scale, without being an inch for inch. I'd say it's more like a caricature than a photograph. Now the middle flap line just has a line edge to edge. Of course, we're going to have a border on both sides and a line in the front that would define the same way we have it that defines the hinge line, because that isn't going to be scaled no matter what we do. Real easy, and it's a method that I've used with really excellent results without a lot of work even, of just laying out 1/8 inch tape and the outlines that I want to accomplish. It just gives me reference lines. Now if I make this totally or as close to scale as I can, that line that goes on the outside will go right through, so I can just measure up and get an exact line. Same thing back here, I can get that almost exact. You really have to just eyeball this. That's why we have a soft ruler that we can put bends in. Oh, look at this. Look at this. When a camera's running, you're supposed to not make mistakes. You do make a mistake, and we've done this before. And just wipe it right off. Keep the big knuckles out of the way. Now obviously I have to get this line on the bottom, these two lines, and then I'll have one side done and I can kind of look at if I'm happy with it or do I want to add or take away. Now with one bottom flap kind of laid out, it's time for breakfast in our house. I'm going to go upstairs and have breakfast. Have another cup of coffee and think about how I want to do it. Do I want to add anything? Because once I do both sides I have to continue that line right around. And that of course has to be real accurate. And then I always like to get up before my wife gets up, have a cup of coffee, think about what I'm going to be doing, plan out my daily schedule, because there's so many things to do. It just isn't, you know, like just go buff props all day or something. It just, the scheduling of it and the time management is a major part of what I have to get done if I want to be efficient about this. So it'll look kind of symmetrical. I wouldn't want the shading to be a whole lot darker on one side than the other. And I can kind of look back and forth and see how much I've got. What I really do enjoy though is when you shoot the clear on this for the first time and that color pops. Like a lot of the Brodak candy colors, they look very, very soft until you actually hit them with clear. Now we're going out this way. See, I'm working left-handed now. I don't see any reason anybody that really wanted to do this kind of. This would look really effective on a white plane, by the way. I was just thinking of that. Like an old Stingray kind of plane. An Olympic. Actually, it looks good on a B25 Silver, though. I really like this. But again, I might be a little prejudiced. Just a little bit. Now I need to put in the corners. And again, I'm looking left to right. The corners really do look effective. Now I have to make a couple of short templates to get in here. So I'll use this one up. because it's got so much paint on it that I can just basically throw it away now, or probably could use it for sandpaper if you really were, you know, in real economy mode. Now to critique the whole wing in one piece to make sure it's balanced. Back of the nacelles have that same look. Turbochargers have the same look. And basically the only thing left to do here is flip this over, do the bottom exactly the same. And if we have time, get some clear sprayed, or else hope that tomorrow is going to be a better day for shooting the first coat of clear on this and seeing how all these ink lines are going to hopefully, I call it pop, but it's probably a better word. It's time to flip it. We'll do the whole bottom off camera because it's going to be exactly the same. I hope we can get some clear on this today. Now, yesterday I put the first coat of clear on everything. Today we'll try to get the second coat on. Looks like we're going to have a decent enough day for spray painting, so we're going to try to space it out. Maybe get a coat on early in the morning, a coat on late in the afternoon. We just have to play it by ear with the weather. The only problem here, it's a little chilly this morning, but as long as the humidity isn't high, we should be able to get on a really nice coat of, get that dope to lay down in the cool weather. I've been thinking about that Dub Jet bubble tank, and that has the potential, if I can figure out a way, and if anybody out there has an idea, I'll be all ears. Kind of a shut-off valve that you could mount to the side of the plane like a needle valve, so that you could fill that tank before you went out to the circle, and then turn that little valve so it wouldn't siphon. Because even Dub has told me it's a problem that once you fill it, you have to put forceps on it. Well, yeah, I had trouble with it yesterday too. But I'm thinking somebody in the world of RC must make a little shut-off valve that you could just mount there. But think of the potential motor runs you could have if you never had to deal with air bubbles. Even if for one thing, if right at the end of the flight, like the most important thing on a 4-stroke, if you don't have an ounce of fuel in the tank at the end when you finish the pad in the clover, the motor wants to quit. Well, half an ounce or whatever, maybe less than an ounce. But what that does, it goes right to the end and just shuts the motor off. You don't get 10 laps of that real lean where the motor's killing itself in dead lean mode. Just gets to the end and it's just like pinching a fuel line. So I'm trying to give some thought to that. I'm going to talk to Noel Drindak. He's one of the people that's aware of all these little gizmos and things they make in the world of RC. But a little shut-off valve would do it. Just a little. And you know, it isn't as big a deal as I'm thinking of one thing. You see, this is the thing. When you're buffing something out, I hope I'm getting this point across. You have hour after hour here. You can either watch Speed Vision or watch Windy videos or something, but it's to come up with ideas. Now, the idea is, when I buy supplies for my indoor fish, I always see these little turn valves. I just wonder if they would be fuel-proof. The real good way to find out, just go buy a few of them. So maybe in right to life. Now I'm just getting ready, putting a final shine on this, because I want to see what it's going to be like. This is the last thing I'm going to be able to do today. And tomorrow we'll get down and sand the rest of these parts out. He's making me crazy. You can see how nice that's coming up. We got one more nacelle to do and then we'll flip it over. You're going to see just how tough you really are. And I mean, this is really the test. I would say, I got the whole bottom buffed out already, but I'm going well into the day, well into the point where I really should have taken a break, because I'm excited about seeing the whole part buffed out. But there is a point at which, and I'm already at that point, I still have one panel to do, where the old arm, it just won't take it anymore. Even a bird is looking at me and thinking I'm crazy, but I really figure if I get the push on this, and we don't get the phone ringing too many times, I may get this done today. Boy, what a milestone that would be, to be able to go to bed tonight knowing this buffing is at least done this much. The other thing, I got a call from Dave Downey. They've got P6 drawings in the mail waiting to come to me, so we'll get them and get a copy of them down to Ron Merrill, try to get him stoked. And I can relate to it. Going so hard, it hurts.
My sneakers have become greasy, Rich.
You're standing back there?
Oh, look at him.
Oh, there, that sounds like combat pay.
He's getting combat pay.
That's exactly right. He's going to have to buy me a new pair of sneakers after he finishes flying in this bomber.
You got that right, baby. Now, I hope those little outtakes had some good information. See, the problem is that information doesn't go out of style. All that stuff about the pens, and you can see how years ago, and that's 7, 8 years ago, 5 years ago, we were pretty much evolving this system that we come to use right now. Now, I'm at the point right now with this, and I always like looking back at those DVDs with that information while I'm doing this, or before I'm finalizing it anyway. But because I'm almost ready to finalize the bottom of the wing, what I'm trying to do now at this point is do a balance. Now, it doesn't matter if they're both dark or they're both light, but you really I don't want to have one dark and one light. So what I try to do is I look at, say, the gear doors, radiators, and I try to, the one that's lighter I can make darker, or if I wanted to lighten one, I could just backmask this and just shoot a little silver in there. But it's really not a big deal, and in my case, I like to look at it from several angles, and what I like to do, of course, go get another cup of coffee. Don't even fool around with this, because even if this is the only thing I get done today, I want this to be balanced, done, and then I'm ready to the last thing on this ship to be airbrushed is going to be the top of the wing. I want that to be the best. So I've already hopefully got out all my kinks and all my little issues that I was trying to deal with or make better or balance. And little by little by little, this is really starting to come to life. And I just can't imagine, you know, in my case, when Joe and I first started talking about this project, and then to see how it's come to fruition in this short amount of time, and with the weather starting to get nicer and nicer each day, I'm under a little bit of a pressure to finish it, but not really, because I've already been down that road. But what I am under a lot of pressure is to really get the shading and the inking part of this, and that's what this DVD is really about, to add something to the model that wouldn't be there if we just left it painted and trimmed out. Make it stand out in a crowd, make it a little bit different, make it the Ducati in a parking lot full of Suzukis. And when you do that, make it the Ferrari in a parking lot full of Ford Escorts. I don't know. When you do that and you start to close in on it, and I feel like I'm closing in on it now, I sit back, I get my cup of coffee, and I look at this from a lot of angles, and every time I look at it, it looks a little different. I see things that I didn't see before. I see things that I might want to upgrade. But if you get nothing else off the DVD, you never do this and then just go put the clear on. You always want to look at it, at least come back in the morning and look at it, or look at it after a couple of cups of coffee. Now again, this is the balancing act that we all have to deal with here. And there's no way I know to get this right without having to go back and forth. And I try to do this a little lighter than necessary. A little darker. A little darker up there. Because I really wanted the aileron feature to stand out, so I really did make it a little bit darker than I really should have. And then when I pulled the tape off, I liked the way it looked. I said, oh, gee, I like that one. I like that very defined look. Especially on the bottom, say when it goes over in a wing over, or I know you can see some of these details while it's flying. Now, do I have it close? A little bit more here. Got that sticking back. Okay. Yeah, those old DVDs and videos, they're still... As many times as I've watched them, there's always something I go, oh, I forgot about that. Oh, geez, good thing I remembered that. Now, before I flip it, I want to three-dimensionalize the little hatches that we have on the bottom. Now what I do on these, just to three-dimensionalize them, get this
just the slightest little bit, and drag the airbrush back. As if they were, well, it's not as if that's the way they look. If you go look at a real aluminum aeroplane, it's always leaving the aluminum oxide on the way back. Now we know this piece is going to be a shaded, we know we have to get some around here. The lip of this scoop I wanted to get. Now we may be able to get that nice little piece of screening in there, I hope. Okay, and that edge is okay. The thing I wanted to do from this angle, I wanted to, well, this is the only way I'm going to be able to do this. And it doesn't go around exactly, you can't really do it with one piece of wide tape the way you think you can. Trying to just get a little piece of tape on this. Yeah, the memories of building the B25, Dave Downey, Joe Adamusco. Boy, the days that was a lot of time, believe me. Believe me, not like building a Brodak Cardinal or anything. I wanted these to kind of fade out on the wing a little bit if I could get them that way. Alright, I can live with that. And obviously, when we're all done, we got to look at the top and bottom also at the same time. Make sure we're not... And it's just, I don't even know if it's really that important as I think it is. To keep it kind of equal. That one side isn't darker than the other side. It could be that I'm overestimating that too. Another thing you can see from these old DVDs, the rules that applied 8-10 years ago, the rules haven't changed. And the things that worked 20 years ago still work. And when Big Jim Greenaway was alive, he had a great saying. He says, the airplanes will change when gravity changes. Well, I'm not sure that's the best way to put it, but yeah, that I think is fine. Now the thing is to do that other side and get it equal. See, because if it isn't equal from the front, as it comes at you, it's going to look hokey. So that's keeping it symmetrical is one of my major concerns right now. And I really think we got it. I'm real happy with the way that all worked out, because I know, I've done this enough times to know that once you put the silver on this the clear on this B25 silver, it just pops. Just turns into a Mercedes-Benz. Unbelievable how good that paint is. Now as I look at it, I think, well,
Again, I wouldn't make that decision right now, but I feel comfortable enough that I can flip it and start doing some of the top. I don't know how much of the top I'll get done. Of course, this day, like a lot of days around here, this day is moving right along. But, and maybe when Obama becomes president, I'll get a lot less calls. You never know. I like the way the radiators came out. They're almost scaled, the gear. There's a lot of parts of this that came out way better than I thought they would. And I think, see, having the ailerons dark like that, it really sets them out. I think that's really going to be one of the defining features when it's in the sun and when it's all shined up and everything. Now, a couple of the tricky things were to try to get this balanced, if you can see it from the front of the wing, that it balances going out on both sides. Boy, that was not a 5-minute job. Now, getting the two areas in the front, because where the fuselage comes down, it would in essence be a line, and I wanted to have a little bit of shading where it sticks out. So I had to just randomly put some shading there, and then of course go from the line also, so it would be something that looked like it matched. But as this is, and this is not a whole lot different than doing the other side, but getting it back, now from this point on, I'm more concerned with balance than anything else. Again, the thing I'm looking for, most important of all, is the balance now, that I'm not getting this out of balance one way or another. And even if I err on the side of being a little bit on the light side, I can always go back, put a piece of tape out there and darken it. It's not a problem at all to ever do that. The problem is when you put too much, it's harder to put the silver on if you have to mask out a little area. And I think we have an area on a fuselage where I have to lighten it up a little bit. I have to put it all together in one piece before I make that decision. Now this is one of the defining things, is to get these corners pretty equal too. It isn't enough that you just get the straight lines equal. But it's starting to get really exciting. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Every time you go through this and you peel some more off, it just gets more and more interesting.
thing I gotta constantly be looking for where I missed a spot.
Sing you a song of love. On every tree there sits a bird, and everyone I ever heard could break your heart without a word.
And it just goes on forever. But at the balancing, this is where it really starts to get a little more difficult than just blowing on paint. And then there's the constant standing back and looking to see where this is going. Well, we're closing in on having this pretty well done, pretty well balanced. Now, it's been a long time coming. All this inking and fading and shading and but I really do feel it. This is one of the things that really lets the plane stand out in the crowd when it's done right. Let's hope that this is done right. Let's see, we got it almost the same, almost the same. By the way, Karen got home from her art lesson today with her first painting. It's her first art lesson and her first painting. She is as excited as can be about her painting. So as soon as I get all the tape off of this, I'm going to go take a look at it. She's given me the word. All right. Now it looks like the only issue that I can see we have is that side looks considerably darker than this side. These here look fine. They look like a good match. But again, what I need to do is look at this on the floor, and I need to, more than anything, look at it tomorrow morning when I get back down to shop and check it out. Now, because there's going to be some areas that and here's one of them right up here, that I just have a little bit too dark right there, and I'm just going to hit that with a little, I'm going to back mask this, put a little silver in the airbrush, and just one switch, and hopefully get that straightened out. Let's go see Karen's painting. I'm excited about this. Okay, so you can tell, this is your first picture from your first art lesson.
First oil painting lesson.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think that's fabulous. Now, are you going to build a B25 next?
Not a chance.
Not a chance. That is very nice. Were you going to put that in the house, the shop, or what are we going to do?
Not the shop. Find a spot.
Find a spot for it? That is nice. That is, now, this is your first art lesson. Your first picture.
My first oil painting.
Your first oil painting. Obviously, you're still going for lessons. That's very good. I'm impressed. Now, do we hope Buzz Brodak is impressed? Buzz, you better be impressed.
I'm having fun.
Just look what the artist is watching here. Look at this. She's got a TiVo'd up. I gotta watch. Oh no! Dancing with the Stars. Oh no! Am I glad? I'm going back down to shop. Thank God I got work to do. Dances with B25s. She's got that TiVo going. Oh man. I'm just not sure how I want to do this. Do I want to lighten up the inner one or darken up? And I definitely did make this one darker than that one. Nothing another cup of coffee won't help me decide on. Nothing like a good cup of coffee to make a decision like this. Now see, this one is lighter. This one is darker. And I'm not sure. What I'm going to do is back mask this again and just hit it with just a tiny amount of silver. And there's one spot on a fuselage up here. When I looked at it many times in a row, it's that second bar. See, not this one, that next one. I want to hit that with a little bit of silver too. So I'm just going to switch. There's nothing over here that needs to be touched up. So I really have two relatively small touch-ups. That aileron and that bar on the fuselage. And then I think that's going to be it for today. I think we're going to count our B25s while they hatch, before they hatch. Yeah, see, that really does stand out, that one is darker than the other. But again, that's the beauty of this whole thing. There's no part of that you can't change in a couple of minutes. Now here's the thing, when you change the paint in the airbrush to B25 silver, you gotta run a couple of little jars of thinner through to get all those little metal flakes out. That's a constant pain. See, now we have two choices here. And the simplest one is we're going to put a little bit of that silver since I have to do the other touch-up. But it's a lot easier now. I'm going to go over the ink line. I want to be out onto the airbrush area. And it takes a little bit of... sometimes I have to go back and forth over this a few times. But if I can cover up the ink line, then I don't have to re-ink it. But if I don't get it to where I'm happy with it, simple, then I just got to re-ink it. But I try to get it right out over the ink line. And sometime if it's your lucky day and you backmask it and you get over the ink line, the silver will just, and it's done. Now another thing, and I realized I could save myself a little time. I had an extra cup to put the silver in, but the problem with silver is those little flakes go everywhere. So what I try to do is just cover up as much of this with a towel. But I just don't want to get those little silver flakes on everything. This is really overkill, but I just think I just don't want to have any extra work on this. I want this to be, hopefully, my best effort. Hopefully not have something that I could make better somewhere down the road. Now, the problem as always is that I have that separate little jar for the silver. But this silver really covers, there's a lot of little silver stuff going on in here. So what I really want to do and I just want this to be, this will get as much of the black out of the gun as I can. There we go. Oh boy, is that coming out now. I forgot I had this extra little cup. Now the last step, the black is back in the gun. After running a lot of thinner through it. Now I can just redo this edge. Same thing there to equalize that so that the two sides were the same. And I think we've got it now. I think the wing, we can hug it and kiss it. Didn't even have to do the ink lines over on that side. And it looks great when I lay it on the floor and stand back and look at both sides at the same time. Well, that's the end of a very good day of inking and shading. I think we got it just right.
Well, this morning we woke up and it is just a spectacular day. It's cold, but there's not a cloud in the sky. It's just unbelievable.
Now, the only reason it matters for us, oh, look at that sky. Oh, this is a time of year in this part of the country, it's just like heaven. Cool in the morning, nice in the afternoon, and we hope by this afternoon we're going to be putting some clear on this plane, one way or another. So Enzo, listen, it was a long time coming. You need new feet, new socks. It was a long time coming, but we finally got some weather. It looks like we're going to be able to get some clear on today. Now, because it's so beautiful and sunny, I almost guarantee it'll rain this afternoon. That's the way it's been this whole year. But Enzo guarantees we're going to get some clear on this plane today, one way or another. Go Enzo. But this is the part I always like to do that always seems to, I find something the next day that I didn't like the day before. And yesterday I found the leading edge that I didn't like. Today, I'm pretty satisfied for a change. Now, one of the next steps, and just so you see how this is evolving, John Pothier has made us up some decals. They're in the mail. They obviously aren't here today. But he's worked on a file for us that has the pilot's name and some of the lettering, the AMA numbers. But before we could put any decals on this, we would have to put a coat of clear on everything. So what I thought I'd do today, and what I did, I added some last night. I added some Zeus fittings around the valve covers. I did the exhaust stain in brown, the Tiger Cat brown, even though it looks black, that is brown. I came back down to shop late last night and I just did a couple little walk-arounds to try to find things I wanted to add, take away, change, darken, lighten. But you know what? At some point in time, it's like anything else. It's at some point in time, the word I've heard in the past is cut bait or fish. And I think it's time to fish. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix up a coat of clear that's about 50%, maybe a little more thinner. And this will be just for the first coat. The reason for that is I don't want to get any very thin clear around the canopy, and certainly nothing with retarder. And I don't want to take a chance that I'm using up last year's can of paint. I want to mix a dedicated batch. Now, when it comes to putting a clear on a plane this size, what I always think is appropriate, a 40 size plane, a quart, a plane this size, a quart and a half. And if you really have a semi-scale plane and it's coming out light and you put the extra half a quart on, the world didn't end. But we're going to try to keep this to a quart and a half of clear. And usually that results in, once it's buffed out, about a 7-ounce finish. And then I don't know if I'm going to be talking to Richard Oliver if we're going to be putting on some of that fuel proofing stuff up by the nose. I'm not sure or we're going to paint the whole fuselage with it. I'm not sure yet. I need to talk to Rich about that. That's a whole nother subject. But right now, I just feel like finally I'm happy with the way the ink looks, and we're ready to mix up that batch of clear and get spraying. Now it seems like this might be overkill. Every time you think something is overkill and you don't do it, you wind up, why didn't I do that? Well, at least I do anyway. Now, I've got jars that have no retarder, clear that's already mixed. I've got several, and you can see because we paint all the time in the shop. This is another can of material. Well, so in the past, what I had done several times, and I really learned this lesson the hard way, I'd take the old material, mix it all into one batch, strain it, make sure there wasn't a brush hair or something in there, and just, I'd see my ink lines were just a little foggy or something. Then I'd look and say, oh, there's retarder in that. Well, in the first coat that goes down onto that paint, I don't want any retarder. Now, I'm done putting masking tape on the plane, so I can trade away a little bit of that bond, just a little bit, but I can't trade away some of that retarder or a lot of thinner. If you mix up a batch that's 70% thinner, it's going to melt the ink lines, it's going to smudge the edge of the paint lines. I want just a little more, and I'd say if you measured it, probably a good starting point is 55% thinner. But I have a real scientific way of doing it. I just look. And I always take, these cans look 100 years old, but believe me, they're not, because I'm always using them to test spray stuff on. I do this very scientifically. It's just, you see on the side of the jar, we only need to do this for one. I'm going right up to the line. And this is a method that, this is for my first coat of clear. I don't want the first coat of clear to go in and melt the ink lines, melt the canopy. You can see these jars have a little indentation. Now I'm going to go to what would be 50% and just a little bit more with the thinner. And every single time, this is a pretty neat can. Look at that. See, Brodak could customize his cans. Every time I hear that somebody had a problem using Brodak dope, there's 50%, there's 55. Now that's going to be my first coat of clear. And by the way, this is exactly a pint, so I factor that into my 1.5 quarts. And at the end of it, maybe what I'll try to do with this is 1.5 quarts of the clear, and then that Richard Oliver clear stuff on the nose. But I don't know about that. And the way we resolved that last year was just by running muffler pressure, and that totally cured the problem. So I don't know. Again, we're going to start, that whole cycle of issues comes up the next time. And we can always do that. That's always one of the choices, is run pipe or muffler pressure. Now the reason I shake it up so much, I can tell by looking at the material. See where the bubbles are on the top? I can see that that's just about how I want it. If it's too watery, I know what's going to happen. It's going to sink down and it's going to penetrate too much. It's going to dry shiny, so that's nice. But I don't want this to dry shiny. I want this to just seal this. Number one, so I can put the decals on. I need to put my nose art on, my decals, the AMA number. So I really, and I want to get some sealing up around the edge of the canopy, because I'm going to need a lot of extra around those edges of the canopy. So this is one of the little tricks. I don't know if it's really a trick, but it's one of the little ways that you can make a, and of course we're gonna go spray right now. It's a beautiful day out there for painting. The one thing not to do is that first coat, and I can remember, without naming names, I can remember several people said, oh, you know, I found a great trick. You pour a lot of retarder in, or in somebody's case, they went and bought high gloss thinner. Yeah, oh, look at that gloss. Oh, look, it looks like a mirror. Look at that shine. And you know what happened? Then the next day, when you look at the ink lines, they all look like, you know, they had a curve in them. And when you go to all the trouble to put these razor edges on things and all these little details and rivets and Zeus fittings, and then to have them melt, So the key is, and this is the only point I wanted to make, it's that first coat that's going to seal this. Once it's sealed, then we can add a little more thinner to the mix, a little more thinner, a little more thinner. But what we're going to do, rather than do that, is after this, after I get this material on the plane, then I'm going to mix up what will amount to be another batch of material. And in that batch of material, that'll be the rest of my 1.5 quarts. And what'll happen is each time I spray, I'll add a little thinner, a little thinner, a little thinner, and if necessary, hopefully not, add a little retarder. Hopefully not have to do that, because hope the weather's going to be good right now. But it's okay to add all the thinner you want. If you can leave it that at the end of it you've only put on 1.5 quarts of clear. It's the clear that adds the weight, the thinner evaporates. So within reason, you can thin out each coat just a little more, just a little more, just a little more. And if you possibly can avoid retarder altogether and just spray in good weather, well, but you notice, as I say it, yeah, I've got a can of retarder sitting right here, just in case, because if I go out and paint something and it blushes, I want to come in, spike it with 10% retarder and get rid of the blush. So I'm not sure I'm making my case, but the things that I've always seen go wrong in paint jobs, they almost always go wrong right away when you put the clear on. That's when you melt an ink line, melt the canopy, letrosets melt. In this case, we don't have any letrosets. And then we're going to have to figure the areas of the plane, and maybe I'll do a storyboard on this later or at some other time, where we want to put extra material. But you could look at any of the old videos that have all of this, I call it the 1/3, 2/3 method. And that's worked so good. Every time I do that, I have a 7. In the worst case, you're going to have a 7.5 ounce finish. But you never wind up with a 10 or a 12 or a 15. Now, just one other thing. I have a dedicated gun. I call it a dedicated gun. That never has anything in it but clear. And if you could afford to do that, doesn't have to be any gun in particular. These guns are so inexpensive. The amount of thinner you use to clean them, it'd be easier just to have a dedicated gun. In this case, this is an expensive gun. It's an Iwata. And I keep this gun. This gun never gets anything in it but clear. And I have found that to be a great investment, because what happens at this point in time, if I had just finished painting green or blue, and there's 1 micron of blue in there, it's going to come out on the top of the outboard wing or in the pilot's eye or something. So these little rules, they're not rules like, you know, like if you went to college and the professor said, well, this is the rule for doing this and this. These are the things you learn the hard way by building models, and there's no easy way. There's no, you know, if you look at my workbench, and I love those old tools. If you look at my spray gun, yeah, it's all greasy and dirty and but the inside, it's clean as a whistle. It hasn't had any schmutz. Other people I've seen clean the whole outside of the gun. It looks like it's chrome plated, and inside, they save money by not running acetone or thinner through to clean it. Well, and then you have people like Bob Brookins that clean everything, so I don't know. But I know this works for me, and this is something I can pass on. And if you want to have a 7 ounce finish, this is the only way I know that has worked for me over and over again. Now I just got to make sure that my material's spraying, and I want to get the camera so the wind is at my back. I don't want the, see, one of the things I do when I try to shoot this, not only have the sun at my back, but don't have that the paint is blowing up onto the camera lens. Listen, uh-oh, they're fighting. You hear these birds mating? We're in the middle of mating. We're in the middle of mating season here. Can you believe this? Here's what they're unhappy about. They go in and out. See that hole up by all these old houses have holes around the drain pipes? Those Yankee gutters, right up there is where they build a nest every year. We have fledgies coming out of there. Now, the B25 silver, once there's a coat of clear on it, totally changes. It takes on a whole different look once it's got a coat of clear on it. Now both of the colors, the red and the silver, they always change dramatically once you get any amount of clear on them. There's a real nice sparkly look. Something I hope is going to stand out in the crowd. And the purpose of this coat is just to seal this up for the next steps. Roll the edges. See, the reality is it's kind of a dry coat. It's not a super, super wet coat. Oh, I hear those birds. Now the red, another color that changes dramatically once you put the clear on. Even a couple of coats of clear, it changes the whole look of the color. Makes it a lot brighter. And this is a coat you want to get on dry though. You don't want to have this dripping and drooling and always try to get the edges a little extra. that's going to look like when it starts to get a nice shine to it, some clear. And I got to tell you, I love this red when it gets... That is a good catch. I just noticed right there. I don't know what that is. You got a big splotch. I have to go fix that before I put the clear on. Now you think, as many times as I've checked these parts, I didn't notice that. Now that's dry, and I had a little look like ink, but it wasn't. It was paint. I had to sand it off and retouch that corner up. That's why it's nice to always have the paint in the gun, because I'm slow. Oh, what a day. What a day for painting. Now, even if we have to wait a couple of days for the decals, it won't matter, because we've got other projects to work on, of course, but it'll also give this paint a few days to dry out, which is always to your advantage. Always amazes me how these colors change once you have the clear on them. Boy, it just pops. Done this enough times that I shouldn't be surprised, but I am. I always am. And this is just a sealing coat. No other purpose other than we can put more decals, or at least we can see if we have any spots we want to touch up. What do you got? My mail. My neighbor has my mail. Hang on. Boy, we have made it through kind of a rough winter. But boy, a day like today really makes up for all the disappointment. All those cold mornings. Oh, what a day. What a day. I think the problem is, while this clear is drying, Karen is going to want to work on the backyard, clean a pond or something. But it doesn't matter. Once I get this clear drying, it won't matter.